This is Reasons We Serve, a channel dedicated to the women and men of law enforcement. This is episode 88. David Contreras, retired Detective Sergeant, San Diego Police Department. Born in Tijuana, Mexico, David came to the United States and, as a young child, knew he wanted to become a police officer. As David explains, he always had a sheepdog mentality and was always looking to defend the weaker kids who were getting picked on by bullies, and saw law enforcement as a way to protect others who were being preyed upon. As a young man, David became the founder and executive director of the new Life Rehabilitation Center for drug addicts and hardcore gang members. David explains that it was here where he learned his communication skills and began his education in how to deal with gang members and drug addicts, and developed a philosophy to never believe anyone without first looking into the facts. David was later hired as a correctional officer, where he worked with maximum security inmates and developed expertise in gangs and furthered his street education in dealing with people from all walks of life. At 28 years old, David was recruited by a mentor to the San Diego Police Department, where he began a long and storied career. With 8 months on patrol, David talks about what it was like in San Diego in heavy crime and gang-ridden areas, and tells the story of purchasing drugs in full uniform. Throughout his career, David worked in the gang unit, internal affairs, narcotics, community relations, and was the assistant to the chief of police. Most importantly, David worked for the Criminal Intelligence Unit, which worked as the Mexican Liaison group, working directly with the Mexican government on crimes such as rape, robbery, narcotics, and murder. The CIU unit worked in Mexico, where David and his team often found themselves searching for suspects from the United States hiding in Mexico. David is the co-author of the book, When the Music Stops, the Pain Begins, which discusses the troubles law enforcement officers have reintegrating into society after a career in policing. David is also working on his second book about active shooters, their mentality, and the after effects. Finally, David is the co-host of 3 podcasts. The Gray Line, the story behind the Blue Line, where he and his co-host talk to various guests about law enforcement, as well as suspects they dealt with, as well as a spin-off podcast called Ash Wednesday, where they discuss numerous topics. If you love God, family, country, whiskey, and a great cigar, this is the podcast for you. And lastly, the podcast, The Three Chingones, which is a boxing podcast where David and his co-host discuss past and present boxers and boxing matches and provide their analysis. This is his story. Okay, can you introduce yourself for me, please?
Okay, my name is David Contreras. I'm a retired detective sergeant with the San Diego Police Department. Okay. I worked for the San Diego Police Department for 27 years. Okay. Prior to working for the San Diego Police Department, I worked for the California Department of Corrections for four and a half years from 1985 to 1989. And prior to working there, I was executive director of a rehabilitation program for drug addicts in trouble with youth in San Isidro I was the founder of the program by the name of New Life Apostolic Outreach, where I had up to 36 men, hardcore gang members, prison gang members in a home, a Christian home. And our therapy was the Word of God. We would basically pray for these men, teach them. They would stay in the in-house facility for 9 months to 1 year. And that's where I developed a lot of my expertise, not only to working with gang members, hardcore gang members, prison gang members, to helping them through the Word of God. Yeah. I left that in 84 and 85. I got hired Department of Corrections, and then my law enforcement career took off. But I did work with hardcore drug addicts, and I started that program.
So before we start talking about your career, tell me about your early life. Tell me about your family, your mom, dad. Where'd you grow up? What kind of kid were you?
You know what? I was born in Tijuana, Mexico. At the age of 9 months old, my parents moved to San Isidro. Those are people that know San Diego. We lived in San Isidro, I believe, a year and a half. And then when I was like 2 years old, we moved to Chula Vista. Chula Vista is right next to Otay, between San Isidro and National City. And that's where I grew up. I went to my elementary school there, junior high school there in Chula Vista. Who was I? Niles, I was that guy that literally I knew as a child, 5 years old, I could tell you. maybe probably even younger, that I was going to be a police officer.
Why? What do you think that was?
You know what? I really don't know, but I'll tell you what kind of guy. And you could go back and talk to anybody that knew me as a kid. I was that guy that I was always a pretty strong kid, and I always boxed, I wrestled. I mean, I was in pretty good shape throughout my life. It was a younger, not now, I'm older, but I'm telling you, I was that guy that was always protecting the special ed kids. Back then, now we call them spectrum. Back then, there was no such thing. So we had kids with this that were dyslexic, that couldn't read. And I was that guy that wasn't volunteering because I wasn't the smartest person in school either. But anybody that picked on somebody that I knew that was, we call them spectrum now. Back then, we call them slow. Dude, I was that guy that was always protecting them. I was that guy that in the third grade, fourth, fifth grade, I was fighting sixth graders that were picking on these kids. So throughout my life, I've always been that guy that always, my friends, the majority of my friends, they were special ed. And I'm not talking about that they were dyslexic. They looked normal, but they were picked on.
Yeah.
So even as a young man, I was that guy that was always protected. Even throughout my life, I've always been that guy that's been standing up for the weak. And I'm not saying they're weak, but the ones that people picked on. So that's whom I always was.
So where do you think that came from, David? Because I know a lot of military guys and a lot of law enforcement guys have this sheepdog mentality that I think in my mind is kind of Chris Kyle kind of made that term famous. But where do you think that sheepdog mentality came from within? Did it come from your parents? Where do you think that came from?
It came from my parents. My dad was a pastor. Okay. His father was a pastor of a church, the Apostolic Church, Pentecostal church. My mom was a woman of prayer. I hear these stories on my shows. I talk to a lot of cops. I talk to a lot of con men. I talk to a lot of convicts. And when I hear their stories that they had no relationship with their father, or they didn't know who their father was, I am so blessed, Niles, that I saw my father pray. I saw my father help people. So I think the sheepdog mentality comes from my dad, comes from my grandfather. I mean, my lineage. They were servants, but yet they were warriors. Yeah. My dad never served in the military, but I'll tell you, my dad would be the first. If somebody did something to us or my mom, my dad would be the first to knock the guy out. But yet at the same time, he would pray for him. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I come from that, and I think that I believe you're born with it. I believe that it's displayed. I think we're all born with that sheepdog, but some refuse to acknowledge it, or it's never displayed. To me, it was displayed when I saw the weak being picked on by bullies. That's why even today I hate bullies.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think that's why I was a good cop, because I always saw these guys as the bullies, as the predators. And you know what? That sheepdog, I didn't know that it came from. I'm
not saying it came from him.
But what I'm saying is, you know what? After I retired, I opened up my company. It's called www.sheepdog Assist.
Yeah.
And assist stands for Active Critical Incident Stress Trauma. But I've always, after I retired, saw myself as a sheepdog. We're there to protect. But I was that kid. And, and being first generation, was very hard because my parents didn't know anything about college. Dude, we didn't know any cops. All my friends were from school, became heroin addicts, became members of, they were gang members from Otay. I mean, you asked me when I was a little boy at 10 years old, 8 years old, what do you want to be? I would have told you I want to be a police officer. You asked Mario Martinez, what are you going to be? I'm going to be from Otay. You have Oscar Martinez. I'm talking about guys that I grew up with. What are you going to be? I'm going to be a member of the MA. I mean, nobody wanted to be a doctor. I mean, we're talking about the barrio, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But they would always respect me because they knew that I wanted. So now, my first encounter with a police officer, I think I was 12 years old. I'm at a high school football game between Castle Park and Sweetwater. There's a huge riot because there's two barrios, Otay against National City, OTNC, Old Town National City back then. And they're fighting in the parking lot. The whole stadium is up in arms. So they called Chula Vista PD, calls the sheriffs call other departments. And this is my first encounter with a cop. I'm standing, because I love football, I'm standing on the field because the bleachers, everybody's fighting, watching the game. They haven't stopped the game yet. And I remember I see a bunch of cops. They form a skirmish line and they're all walking toward us, but we're getting ready to score a touchdown. I'll never forget that. I'm watching a 12-year-old kid, and as the cops are coming, moving the crowd, I didn't see him. All I remember was looking up. I saw this huge, tall, dude, I was a kid, cop, and he hits me. He has a straight-on baton, and he has it through his fingers, and he hits me right here in the solar plex. I remember when he hit me, first thing I thought is, wait, why'd you hit me? And I remember going to the ground. I could not breathe. I thought I was going to die, because he hit me in the solar plex here.
Yeah.
I go to the ground. People are trampling me because now they're even walking over me because they're moving the line. And I'll never forget that. I remember looking up at that cop as he tramples over me. I mean, dude, he was doing his job. I was just in his way because I love football. And I don't blame him. But I remember thinking, I will never be that cop. I will never. And I remember laying there, not being able to breathe, getting kicked by people, just thinking. And I never forgot that. Thinking I will never be that cop.
But it's
Yeah.
interesting, David. Why didn't? And maybe it gets back to your parents as well. But why not have any residual negative attitude towards cops after he whacks you
I
like
probably
that?
did, but right now I'm just telling you
Yeah.
what the thought that comes to mind
Interesting,
was,
yeah.
I will, because I knew I was going to be a cop.
Yeah.
Dude, I knew I was going to be a cop. I just didn't know when or how. But now I'm getting ready to graduate from Castle Park High School. It's 1978. I go see my counselor. His name was Mr. Stone. I remember him. And as I walk in to go talk to him, it's, the last couple of weeks, you talk to your counselor. Snow. That's what it was. And I walk in, and I remember him looking at me. He's looking at my grades. Dude, I wasn't the smartest, right? So he's looking at my grades, and he goes, I read here that your dad's in construction. I go, yeah. I go, he's a cement finisher. Back then, cement finisher were, higher than a labor. And he goes, you have the build, because I was a pretty thick guy. And he goes, I think you should be a cement finisher like your dad. And I looked at him, and I used to work in the summer with my dad. Dude, I hated working construction. Not because I just hated it, right? Because I knew I wanted to be a cop. And I looked at him and I go, sir, I want to be a police officer. He goes, well, do you know any police officers? I go, no. Well, what do you know about them? I go, I don't know. I go, I know I have to go to an academy. Can you help me? And he goes, no. He goes, I think you're going to be a good cement finisher like your father, but you have to start off. And he broke down my career as a laborer, and he broke down like I didn't know, right? I grew up in it.
Yeah.
And I remember walking home that day. Back then, dude, it wasn't like today, where all these kids, you have 1,000 cars waiting for kids. Dude, we walked. At my school, I know you hear it walking in the snow. In San Diego, we didn't walk in the snow. You grew up in Bonita, so dude, but it was a 2-mile walk every morning to school and back. And I remember walking back from school, and when you see those cartoons where somebody has a beautiful balloon and then also it's deflated. I remember I was 17 years old and I'm walking back. I was 18. I was walking back, graduated, getting ready to graduate. I'm walking back, and I remember being deflated because, dude, we were first generation. When I got home, I go, Mom, he said that I got to go to college. Where's a college? Dude, there's a college, Southwestern College. We didn't know. We're first generation. My cousins, nobody knew. We're first generation. So, dude, I'm thinking, I don't know how to become a cop. And, that's one of the reasons why I opened up the rehabilitation program. Well, it's a long story. After reading a book called The Cross and the Switchblade, God placed it in my heart. If David Wilkerson, in that book, Cross and Switchblade, he lived, I believe, in Pennsylvania, and God placed in his heart to go to New York and preach to all these gang members. And that's how we started. It wasn't Victory Outreach. It was one of the big programs, rehabilitation. I go, if he could do it out of Pennsylvania, then I could do it here in Otay. All my friends that are gang members, I could go talk to them about Jesus. And that's when I opened New Life Outreach because of that. But like I said, I was there for 6 years. And it was there working with these probation officers, parole agents, cops that would bring guys to my program that I met cops. And they started mentoring me, saying, you really want to be a cop? Yeah. So that's when I took the test for San Diego PD. I took it to Department of Corrections. I didn't pass the first test for San Diego PD, but I was eligible to take it again. I took it again. I took corrections. Corrections called me. And right when corrections called me, that's when I left the program and I started working in the Department of Corrections. And going through the Academy of Corrections, I had passed the San Diego PD one. This is back in '85, but I was already with corrections. And then that's when I started working the prisons. But it was until I was 25 that I finally learned or knew how to apply and how to be a police officer. So it took me a while, but once I did, my heart and soul was there. That's what I was meant to be.
So tell me a little bit, when you start in corrections in '85, how old are you?
I'm 25.
25.
Yeah.
What type of correctional facility are you in?
It was a level 4. I mean, back then it was a level 3, level 4. They had told me initially that I was going to go to the level 4 back then. It was at Tehachapi State Prison. They were going to build what they call a level 4, all lockdown prison, and they were hiring new guards, correctional officers, to work at this prison. So I get hired to go to Tehachapi while I'm at the academy. I think it was a 6-week academy in Galt, California. While I'm at the academy, all of a sudden, within 3 weeks of graduating, they say, and by this time, my wife, we have 2 daughters. She's looking for a house because we lived in Chula Vista. She's looking for a house in Tehachapi. We didn't even know where Tehachapi was at the time, but in Bakersfield. So she's looking for a house. And she's calling me every week. I'm calling her, hey, so did you find some? Well, I found some apartments. Dude, we didn't know anybody there. So she's looking. And then 3 weeks before I graduate, they say, listen, Tehachapi is an opening. We're sending you somewhere else. And I go, where? I mean, it's not just me. I'm moving my family, right? So they wanted me to go either to Tracy, because I had done my OJT, on the job training there. I think we did 3 or 4 days there. Tracy. And then that's another long story. I run into some people that I knew from New Life there, and which was okay, but it was very interesting. So, and then they offer me San Luis Obispo. Dude, Tracy's in the middle of nowhere. Literally, San Luis Obispo, you got the Pacific Ocean there. It's beautiful. So I call my wife. I go, Tracy, it's a lot of hardcore. I think I would really enjoy, because I knew the Emmett was there, the ABs, everybody. I go, or San Luis Obispo. She goes, the ocean. Goes, do it for me. And I go, okay. So I ended up going to San Luis Obispo. And in San Luis Obispo, it was a level 3, but we had a lot of level 4s. It was a PC joint, a protective custody institution. So that's where they had the Manson killers, not Charles Manson, but they had Tex Watson. They had a lot of police officers that had been arrested. You had Mexican Mafia, Nuestra Familia, Aryan Brotherhood, rapists, child molesters. They could walk the main line there. That was the only PC, protective custody institution, in the state of California. So when somebody, for example, at Folsom, they found out he was a child molester, after they got stabbed or they got away not getting stabbed, they would send him to San Luis Obispo. So that prison, I mean, they were all there, all the worst of the worst.
Did you deal with any famous people at that prison?
You know what? I probably did. I mean, I talked to, I don't know, what do you call famous? I mean, somebody.
Well, I mean, you said like Tex Watson.
Yeah, Tex Watson. I got to know Tex Watson. I dealt with a lot of famous Mexican Mafia members. I mean, Nuestra Familia members. I mean, the guy that killed Cheyenne Cardenas. Those of you that know the story of American Me, the movie American Me, Tiny Contreras, I knew him. He was on my tier. There was a lot of Hell's Angels, a lot of Mongols that were very well known at the time. I dealt with them. Now, I think probably one of the most famous that I ever dealt with, that I actually dealt with him, and when I retired, I literally had lunch with him, Sirhan Sirhan.
Really?
Sirhan. The day that I retired from the PD on a Monday. On a Tuesday, because my son, little David, I call him little David, he's 36 years old now, had never been on a ride along. And the day before I retired, I put a uniform back on, and I took him on a ride along with me. And the reason why, I'm going to go forward a little bit just to get on this story. Yeah. I retired, as you could see, I had a knee replacement. I had to retire 1 month. I was that guy that was going to go out on my shield. I was going to walk out. And I literally, for a year and a half on my right knee, I had bone on bone. And you're only supposed to get cortisone shots, 3, maybe 4 a year. Dude, the last 8 months, every 2 weeks, I was going to Tijuana to get a cortisone shot. Not even my team members, I was working narcotics at the time, knew. Sometimes they would give me a ride to the border. Literally, the last probably month, every 3 days, I was going to Tijuana to get a cortisone shot because I was that prideful guy. Now I look at it as stupidity, but I was that guy that was going to walk out.
Yeah.
So the day I was supposed to retire, February 15th of 2015, but I retired January, I believe it was 5th of 2015. I had to go because I couldn't walk anymore. But I had gone that Sunday to get my last cortisone shot because I was going to walk out. And dude, I don't know what that's going to cause me, but I was that guy, right? And I walked out. But so I put a uniform on the day before, and I took my son. My son is in Spectrum. So God gave me a son that I could protect now, that's Spectrum. And so he went on a ride along with me. I put a uniform. I hadn't put a uniform on in 15 years. And I put a uniform on. He went on a ride along with me. And because he knew that I had worked corrections at Donovan. So I took him to Donovan for a tour of the prison. And dude, like I said, I was barely, I should have been walking with, been on a wheelchair. But I walked it because it was important to my son. Like I said, he's special.
Yeah.
And as we're walking, Sirhan's there, and the correctional officers, one of the officers tells him, because he goes, "Who are those two?" Because and as we're walking, they work for INS. Oh, I need to talk to him. He was eating his lunch. We actually sat down because my son, he looks Arabic. My son, looks Arabic. And we actually sat down, and he was telling me he wasn't guilty. But we talked for about 45 minutes.
Wow.
With Sirhan. What are the chances? And he's
Yeah.
little like my son. My
Yeah.
son's 5'4", 5'3". And this guy, we talked. Literally, he was telling me about, we talked. We had a great conversation. Sirhan. Yeah.
So corrections has got to be a fantastic learning environment for you.
Oh my God.
So tell me kind of, did you have communication skills before you got there? Did it just improve, or is that where you developed your communication
My
skills?
communication skills was working with these drug addicts at the age of 18 years
Oh,
old.
okay. So you already had that.
When I started that rehabilitation program, I've never used drugs in my life. I was never a gang member. I had at New Life, at 18 years old, I had former guys from the Mexican Mafia, from the Nuestra Familia, all in my program. When I left my program, I had a 4-bedroom house with 36 men. We had rooms with 3 tiers. The prisons ended up, state parole, giving me old prison bunk beds, but we had 3 tiers. 9 per room. And in the church I had 36 men. And I was never a drug addict, but I learned talking to these guys about the Word of God. So I knew all their games. So me at 25 working for Department of Corrections, dude, most guys, I was at home there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then the difference between me and everybody else, when you're going through the Department of Corrections Academy, they tell you over and over again, don't tell them anything about you. Make sure they don't know that you're from San Diego because they'll con you. Dude, the first time I walk into Tracy, a guy from one side of the yard, Pastor Contreras, calling me Pastor Contreras, and all these guys that were working in corrections, we're all recruits. We're recruits. They're going, "Who's Pastor Contreras?" And dude, I'm embarrassed. I go, "I don't know." And then the guy comes running toward me to give me a hug, an inmate. They end up tackling him. His name was, they end up tackling him, and they throw him in the hole. They end up taking me to talk to a captain. This guy, he didn't want to assault. He wanted to hug. Why did he want to hug you? Because you know what? His name was Carlos Zuniga. He was a former gangster who later on was going to become a Hell's Angel. And Carlos Zuniga, hardcore individual, probably ran the yard there at the time at Tracy, because I had helped him through New Life. I had prayed with him. Now he sees me and he's all, "You're a correctional officer?" He sees me, he wants to come and hug me. Dude, you don't hug a correctional officer.
Yeah.
So they throw him in the hole. So I talked to the captain. They yell at me. I put on my background that I knew Carlos Zuniga, and I didn't know what prison he was in. So they let me talk to him. Carlos says, David, he goes, I am serving the Lord. He goes, but I'm going to get out. They had given him 13 years for a stabbing. He goes, I'm going to get out in 3 months. He goes, I don't know about now, man. They want to charge me for assault. He goes, did you tell him? I go, yeah, dude, you were going to assault me. So we're talking, and he did get out. I think he got out like 6 months later, and they ended up murdering him. He ended up murdering him. Yeah, he ended up getting shot, killed. But the funny story was, before I became a correctional officer, there's another guy. His name is Güero Sherm, very famous guy, is Raul Leon. He later on became one of the main leaders of the Mexican Mafia. Now that guy, he was fighting a murder case, and I was a deacon in my dad's church. So I would go to the county jail to talk to all these inmates about the Lord. And I would use my dad's credentials. My dad was a pastor, I wasn't, to go into the county jail. Dude, I'm 20 years old. And this guy was there fighting a murder case, which he got convicted of. But what my mom used to do, she used to make me burritos, bean and cheese burritos. And I used to take my dad's credential, because I'm a junior, so no picture, I'm David Contreras, and I used to fill literally his suitcase, little briefcase, with burritos. So I would go in the county jail, and I would sit there, and all the inmates, the hardcore, these were hardcore guys, they would hear about it. All they had to do was listen to the word of God, and I would give them a free burrito. And Güero Sherm later on became one of the main guys. I mean, everybody that's watching the show, they've heard of Güero Sherm. And I prayed with him, and we talked about the Lord. And so when he was fighting his murder case, I was running New Life. He used to write, hey, David, when you come next time, can you bring extra salsa? Something like that. So now I'm working at CMC, right? California Men's Colony. And I never told nobody that I ran a program, but once again, that happened at Tracy. When I got to CMC, I'm walking in, first day there at my new prison, and they keep telling you over and over at the academy, don't tell nobody where you're from, because they're going to try to con you. They're going to go after your children, your family. Pastor Contreras, everybody's yelling Pastor, and I'm like, what the heck, man? So by the time I hit my tier, because I was building 6, third tier, I ran that. Dude, they already knew you're Contreras. Hey, man, your dad's a pastor. They knew, and that was okay. Dude, they're not gonna con me. I know who I am. You know what I mean? But so answering your question, I knew exactly the games they played because I saw them at the age of 18. So I knew the games they played.
Yeah.
Yeah.
California has always been pretty progressive, pretty open.
Yes.
Right. You live with everybody. Tell me, in corrections or with the PD, did you ever have any issues with you being Hispanic?
Of course. I mean, when I started with the Department of Corrections, dude, you couldn't speak Spanish in the prison. You spoke Spanish, and even though you were Mexican, I mean, they loved you to read the letters.
Yeah.
They loved for you to interpret. But if you were talking to another Hispanic officer, people would walk by, hey, you're in America. Speak English.
The other correctional officers.
The white guys. The white guys. I mean, not the other corrections, the white guys.
Yeah.
I mean, they were very, very, you saw it. It wasn't after you proved yourself, and I'm not going to get into that, but you had to prove yourself, then they would accept you. Whether you were white, brown, or Mexican, or yellow, it doesn't matter. But you had to prove yourself. And the way you proved yourself is if you took care of business.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If they saw you a week, and if they saw you taking care of business, you were accepted. But even there, when you'd be drinking and you'd see another Hispanic officer, hey, cabrón, ¿cómo estás? You're in fucking America, Contreras, speak English. And you know what? I was a young correctional officer, so that was it was very common. So yes, but like I said, if they wanted me to read a letter, they wanted me to interpret, they loved me. But other than that, you could, but you were going to have to answer. After a year on, fuck you. What do you mean? We're in America. Yeah, do you speak Spanish? I mean, but the first year, oh no, dude. I mean, you were quiet because you were on probation.
How about with the PD?
Yeah.
Did you have any of those
You know what?
issues?
Yes, I did.
Really?
Yes, I did. When I first came on, I remember I got transferred to Central Division, and I remember I was in the elevator. The elevator was full. It's headquarters at the time, which now is there on Broadway, and 14th and Broadway. And we just finished lineup, and there's a young lady. Her name is Linda Tibbetts. She's red hair, beautiful green eyes. She's in uniform. We had just left lineup, and I walk in, and the elevator is full. But I had to go upstairs to get something out of my locker. When I walk in, she looks at me. She goes, "Contreras?" I go, "Yeah." I had just probably my first lineup there. I go, "Yeah." She goes, "Habla español?" She says, "Spanish." "You speak Spanish?" I go, "Yeah," because her last name was Tibbetts. I go, "You speak Spanish?" She goes, "Soy mexicana de Guadalajara. I'm from Guadalajara." I go, "A poco de Guadalajara?" And dude, there was a captain in the back, and that elevator was packed. He goes, "You're in America. Speak fucking English." And I remember I just turned red, dude. I looked at her, and she just didn't say nothing. And I'm sorry, that time he didn't say fucking. He's just, "You're in America, speak English." It was later on another sergeant said that. And now I had been on for 5 years. When that sergeant said that, oh, I was on him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that captain, dude, I was just quiet. I was quiet. So it was common, you know. But later, when we got our first Latino chief of police, David Bejarano, dude, that completely changed. In 100 years, he was the first, and I believe the only chief of police San Diego PD has ever had. I believe so. He completely, dude, everything changed after that. We could talk Spanish, but like I said, we were welcome when it came time to work undercover, because the majority of them were undercover. Is the Chicanos or the Puerto Ricans? They were the best undercover.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? No matter gangs, narcotics, wherever. But there was some, but no, San Diego PD was very welcoming, but there was a couple of pricks around. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Very few,
Yeah.
but San Diego PD was very welcoming.
Let me ask you this. I don't. So I have a friend that I interviewed, black officer, and I'm curious about what your take on about this is. So he said when he became an officer, he had to essentially give up his black card. Right.
Okay.
He had friends and family and stuff that kind of was like, you're blue, you're no longer black. How is that in the Hispanic? Do you in this Hispanic community? Did you have pushback from any of your friends or maybe even your family? Did they ever look at you differently because you became a police officer?
We're first generation.
Yeah.
My family was honored.
Huh?
My family, my son's a cop.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
My dad at first wasn't, because he didn't want me to carry a gun because of the church, their beliefs. But my dad was proud of me. My family, my sisters were proud of me. My community was proud of me. Now, the gangsters that I would arrest, I mean, they'd once in a while say something stupid. "Hey, man, you're one of us." No, I'm not one of you. You're a fucking predator.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm not a predator. I'm here to arrest you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But no, the kids... you know, there's certain cops, we knew who they were, that were badge heavy, that got their lunch money taken away. I mean, you saw them. I mean, we knew who they were. You know what I mean? They got their lunch money taken as kids.
Yeah.
So now they're cops, so they gave us a bad name. But we cops, we knew who they were. We didn't want to be around them.
Yeah.
They were the ones that once the handcuffs were on, they'd throw the last punch.
Yeah.
And we would literally say, "Knock it off." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the majority of us, dude, I'd say 99%, they're good dudes. They're there because they want to save the community. But answering your question, no. Only the scumbags saw me as a traitor, and I didn't care what they did.
Okay.
But the community in general, dude, they respected. Hey, they would see, hey, a Chicano's there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, if I was a prick Chicano, then you know what? And we had prick Chicanos. Don't think that every Chicano cop or black cop or white cop, like I said before, were I'm not saying they were dirty, but they were jerks.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was never a jerk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So your goal is always to become a police officer.
Oh, yeah.
But why did you end up eventually leaving corrections and getting hired on with San
You
Diego?
know what ended up happening? I was supposed to, when I went to Donovan State Prison, I opened that prison, and I was supposed to go to the security squad. And the security squad, that's their special investigative unit. And there was a lot of politics with the warden at the time, and I was really disillusioned because I was literally scheduled to go to the it's called the security squad, and I was they picked somebody else that didn't have the knowledge that I had.
Okay.
So that was one, but also at the same time, I met my mentor at the time was Carlos Chacon. He's in the book Lines and Shadows. He was working prison gangs at the time. And one of the things that I've always been very good at, I think I was born with this. This is something you learn, but you do learn it. People can, but I was born, is to turn informants, to not turn informants, but to have people trust you. You know what I mean? Have people to cultivate informants. And working for the Department of Corrections, I had informants like you cannot believe. And when he was working the Ayala, Ronnie and Hector Ayala triple homicide, I had informants in prison that were giving me up-to-date information. I was giving it to Carlos Chacon. He was working San Diego PD, criminal intelligence. He was one of the case agents in charge of that. So him and I, even though we grew up together, he was much older than me. I would always hear about him. And the guy's a legend with the San Diego PD prison gang unit, Carlos Chacon. He recruited me to go to San Diego PD. And when this happened with the security squad, it was God sent. Because if I would have stayed, I never would have had the opportunity to work on the streets and to really become a cop on the streets.
Yeah.
I'm not saying corrections isn't. Corrections to me, all it was a springboard.
Yeah.
Working New Life was a springboard to corrections, and corrections for the PD. When I got to the PD, I had so many, I cultivated. Now I had informants in prison, and now I had informants on the street. And wherever I go, I developed informants. And then going to in Mexico, I still have informants in Mexico. So I think that it was a progression.
Yeah.
You know, and it worked out.
Is it fair to say, though, that when you were at the corrections, you kind of developed an expertise of working gangs?
Yes, but it was more working prison gangs and street gangs,
Okay.
tattoo. I've testified as an expert on tattoo identification, on prison-made tattoos, prison-made weapons, on street gangs. I'm an expert on all those things, but I think that I've never testified, but I'm telling you in Superior Court as an expert, my expertise is cultivating informants.
Why do you
Yes.
Why do you think you were good at that? Do you think it was you had a relationship where people knew you were firm but fair, or just tell me why you think you were good at that?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And I had it because I saw my father. My father didn't cultivate informants, but my father built trust in people. And I grew up seeing that.
Yeah.
And how can an 18-year-old kid bring a guy from Folsom State Prison, hardcore prison gang member, and teach him the word of God and have him on his knees praying for him? It's God doing that. So it's always, what I'm trying to say, it's always been a God-given gift. And even though I used it at the church because it was God,
Yeah.
I think when I say I left the church in '84, because that's when I started with the department,
Yeah.
God never left me. So God, and I say God because I give God the honor and the glory. God always set me in certain situations where it's a gift.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Not everybody has that gift.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Where you could cultivate informants.
Absolutely.
You could be the best cop in the world and you could be lucky, but when you have informants, it's not lucky. It's, you know what? You know exactly. And another thing too, don't think that I believe everything. I don't believe everything. It needs to be corroborated. So I wasn't that guy that he told me, no, dude, you know what? Okay, sounds good. But you know what? I corroborated everything. So I wasn't that guy that was crying wolf because one guy told me.
Well,
No,
I
dude.
thought it was interesting because I watched a couple of your interviews, and
Yeah.
the number one thing you kept saying is, "I don't believe anybody."
No, I don't believe anybody. I don't. Even today, that's probably one of my hardest things. I just find myself being very judgmental. But you know what? It's kept me alive.
Yeah.
It's kept me alive.
So, going to San Diego is it because of your mentor? I'm just wondering why you end up there as opposed to another PD. Is it because of your mentor?
You know what? Because he mentored me and he guided me through the process. If I could go back in time, number one change that I would have made, I would have gone in the military.
Really?
I would have been a Marine. I wish I would have been a Marine.
Why?
Because you know what? I mean, the honor behind it. The honor behind it. You know, my daughter served in the Air Force, but But instead of being a Marine, I ran a rehabilitation program for drug. God took me in a different direction. And instead of going with San Diego PD, I think I would have gone with LAPD. Just the mystique of LAPD, I think I would have loved it. But you know what? God had me where I needed to be.
Okay.
So I think it was all, if I believe in God, which I do, that God has everything where we need to be.
Okay.
But if those two changes, but I never would have got a chance to work with drug addicts and learn the culture, learn the mentality.
Yeah.
I never had a chance to work in Mexico like I did, gangs, well, maybe LAPD, but it was all God's plan.
By the time you get to the PD, are you still married?
Yes, I'm still married. My first wife.
How long does your first marriage last into your career?
Well, let me tell you what happened when I'm going through the police academy. We're getting ready to graduate.
Okay.
We're literally getting ready to graduate. I don't remember. Don't ask me how long the academy, 9 months, whatever it is. I don't remember. But we're getting ready to graduate, and probably 2 days, a day before we graduate, our sergeant comes in. He goes, every one of you, we're all the academy classes there. He goes, take out your PD 145. And PD 145 was a little book that they would give you that would fit in your shirt pocket. You take out PD 145, take out 3 pieces of paper. I take out 3 pieces of paper. He goes, write down the name of your significant other, your wife, or your significant other. Write down the name.
Okay.
And I wrote down Liz Contreras, Estrada. And he goes, fold it up. Put it back in your pocket. I fold it up. Goes, write down the name of your 2 best friends. Best friends that you know that they will be there till the very end. Write down their names. And I remember Danny Otto, Oscar Martinez. Wrote their names down. Goes, now put it away. Put it in your pocket. I put it away. And he goes, 50% of you in 1 year are going to be divorced. And 50% of you, 75% of you, she wasn't your wife. She goes, you're not going to be with her anymore, because you are not going to be together with your significant other if she's not your wife. 50% of you. And I remember looking at him thinking, this guy's full of shit. I am not going to be a statistic. I remember that. And he goes, in 2 years, those best friends that you have, he goes, you're not going to have nothing in common with them. And I remember looking at him thinking, I would die. Matter of fact, I got them tattooed on me. They both passed away, my best friends. And it says, you're not going to have nothing in common with them. He goes, in 2 years. And I remember driving home thinking, because that hit me.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting down with my ex-wife, Liz, beautiful, beautiful woman, sitting down with her and telling her, Liz, guess what they told me today? That in a year from now, we're going to be divorced. She goes, do you think so? I go, he's crazy. I will never be a statistic. I'm telling you, a year and a half later, we're signing divorce. And as we're signing the paperwork, she looks at me with tears in her eyes, and she goes, "Do you remember?" I had forgotten about it, but I remember that night at the house telling her, "I am not going to be a statistics." 2 years later, one of my friends, Oscar, dies. Danny died later. I lost contact with him because you know what? I just became so enthralled, so focused on my career that I wouldn't call him anymore. You know what I mean? I lost contact with them. But, we would talk once in a while. But before these guys were Christians, were men that went through my program, they were my best friends, we would talk about the Lord. I stopped talking about the Lord. I had nothing in common. They didn't want to hear. They had been to prison before. They didn't want to hear about, hey, man, I talked to Topo Peters. Hey, Dude, they wanted to hear the Word of God, the book of Psalms. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. We just lost. So, you know what? I became a statistic.
What happened? What happened with your first wife? If you feel
comfortable talking? But you know what? What happened was, I started partying. I was living for God till I was 24 years old. When I got hired with the Department of Corrections, I started partying. I started partying hard. I was like a little kid in a candy store. You know what I mean? I started drinking. I started partying. I became a womanizer. You know what I mean? What woman is going to, live with a man that is cheating on her?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I became everything that I wasn't growing up. I was like a little kid in a candy store. It was all me. So we outgrew each other. My first wife, number one, she was beautiful. Number two, she was a good woman. I have 3 children with her. And she didn't deserve the animal that I had become.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like I've said, for 36 years, I lived without God, but God never left me. Mm-hmm. It was 3 years ago that I rededicated my life to the Lord. But it was my fault. My wife was loyal. She was faithful. She didn't deserve a man like me.
Yeah.
But I was that guy that family reunions were very important in my family. I didn't go for family reunions for 30 years. All my friends, I didn't have any cops that weren't friends. Any friends that weren't cops. All my friends were cops. I had nothing in common with nobody else. And they had to be gunslingers. If you were a lazy cop dude, I didn't even talk to you. I mean, you know the progression that we go through.
Yeah.
By the time I retired as a detective sergeant, dude, I was so cynical. I was so full of hate, so full of anger. I remember one time me and Corey, another very good friend of mine, the guy's a legend, San Diego PD, Corey Chesborough, we're parked in front of headquarters. We're getting ready to go do an operation. And as we're parked there, we see cop cars coming in and headquarters because we're going to have a briefing on the side of the building. We see other cars. And I remember sitting there, we and Corey in the car, we're going, that's a piece of shit. Look at that lazy. Look at that fat slob. Dude, and then I remember looking at him going, you know what? I think it's time for us to retire. We had become so cynical. You know what I mean? At least I was. So cynical that I'm like, you know, that's how you become if you allow the job to do that to you. I allowed that job to do that to me. You know?
Yeah.
So yeah, the job changed me. Okay. I allowed it to.
You get to patrol, you're 28 years old?
No, I get to patrol at 29. Yeah, 28. Oh, yeah, because I started at 25. Yeah, 29 years old.
Okay, so you have all this experience. You're dealing with drug users, you know, as a
New life,
counselor.
yeah.
You're going to correctional. So you have all this experience.
Yes.
First day on patrol, are you scared?
Heck no, I was at home, man. Dude, when I was going through training, 4 months, I think it's 2 months in the academy, and then they allow you to go out with a patrol officer. You can't drive the first time, but you're his partner. I was arresting 11 550s, dude, I came from the joint. I came from the streets, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I would be with my training officer. My training officer had 10, 15 years on, and I would go, stop that guy. He just got out of prison. And he goes, what are you talking about? He just got out of prison. Look, he has the brown shoes. And then he'd go, you're full of shit, David. Because I mean, I was a young recruit.
Yeah.
I pat him down, and then the guys give me a fake name. I've never been to prison in my life. Number one, I probably issued those shoes to him because I was working R&R at the time. And I'm telling him, and then my training officer goes, he could have bought him at the Value Village because he's doubting me. And I go, really? And then I research him, go through his pocket. I see a little red book. I go, I probably gave you this. I go, were you paroled from Donovan? He goes, I go, dude, don't lie to me. I issued you this. I remember you, Contreras, and now he remembers me. You know what I mean? I was that guy.
Wow.
And I say this humbly. Mm-hmm. I was teaching my training officers about parolees. I was teaching them. The only thing they were teaching me at the time was officer safety was very important. Mm-hmm. And number two, how to read a map book. Because I didn't know how to read that damn map book. You know what I mean? But other than that, I was teaching them on under the influence. I was doing tests on the eyes, on that dilation, because I did that in prison.
Yeah.
So no, I was at home.
Okay, so I hate to have you tell the story
tell me.
because you've told it twice, but I think it's such a fantastic story. I think it needs to get out. Mm-hmm. You are not on the job that long, but I want you to tell the story about the trench coat.
Oh, you know what? So now I do 4 phases as a trainee, and all my training officers, I think only one hated me, but the other 3, dude, one of them used to call me clusterfuck because literally, and now he was a chief of police, I think in Iowa somewhere. His name is Todd Jarvis. If he's watching, he'll remember. He used to literally call me clusterfuck because I was one of my almost last training phases. And this guy, I mean, just like that. It's 11 o'clock at night. Our shift is over at 12 midnight. We're getting ready to go. It was called 1019. We go headquarters to go, finish the paperwork. And all of a sudden I go, hey, Todd, can I run that plate? He goes, why? He goes, we're on our way home. I go, let me just run that plate. It comes out 10851, a stolen vehicle. We ended up taking everybody down at gunpoint, finding guns in the car. They were gang members. I just had it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's what he would say, man, get me home. And then another time we're driving back, literally it's like 10:45. He goes, I need to get home because it's my wife's birthday. And dude, I swear to God, we're at Kettner and Harbor. And as I'm getting ready to start going back to headquarters, multi-car accident, literally right in front of me. And he goes, clusterfuck, it's because I got you in the car. He goes, I can't wait to get you out of my car. But stuff like that would happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But going back to the trench coat, so now I'm out of training, and they assigned me to Logan Heights. And back then, Logan Heights or Central Division, dude, only the best of the best. And I'm not saying it was by destiny that I got a chance to go there because I had the gang experience. I had the tattoo. I had the experience. So they send me to Logan Heights. I'm working there, and I'm on a squad where there are a bunch of go-getters. I mean, these guys, they were proactive, my squad. So what I started telling, well, I think Van Cruz already doing it. He would go to the Value Village, which was a thrifty store, and buy these big trench coats. And so I went and bought my big trench coat, and I'm wearing this huge trench coat over my police uniform, my badge, my radio, gun belt. And we used to walk the streets of Logan Heights. We used to be walking the streets, we were working graveyard. So they didn't know who we were. We're lucky we didn't get popped, shot via drive-by. So I had only been on 8 months, literally 8 months. I was on probation. And I tell Van, I go, hey, you know what? I could buy dope. And he goes, really? I go, yeah, let's put our trench coats on. I go, we knew where the dope houses were. So I 8 months on, I put my trench coat on, and I go to the door and I get my $20 bills, going to buy two bundles, $10 a piece, heroin and cocaine. I write my social security. Looking back
wait
now.
A minute. Okay, how did you know to do that? Because that's brilliant.
You know what? They taught me.
Okay, so they
taught me.
you.
Oh yeah, they had been on longer than me.
Okay.
So they go, write your social security. I go, okay. So I write my social security number, but I'm the one that did the buy, right? Because I'm Chicano hair. Back then I had hair, slick back, I look like a gangster. But now I got a trench coat in full uniform. I go knock on the door, and they're hiding behind bushes. So if there's shots fired, right? And if there were shots fired, that trench coat was coming off, and I don't know how I was going to write it. So I knock on the door. ¿Qué quieres, cabrón? Quiero negra, quiero blanca. Dude, I came out of the joint. I talked like them, right?
Yeah.
And he goes, órale. So I give him my $20 bill with my social security number. He gives me the two. We leave. We're still answering radio calls. We don't ask my sergeant. We don't tell anybody we're doing this. So they take me to headquarters. They give me the forms to do a telephonic search warrant. Dude, I don't know what I'm doing, but they held my hand through the process. I get sworn in, telephonic search warrant. We get it. We're still not telling our sergeant. So now it's 3 a.m, working graveyards, 3 a.m, 4 a.m. Guys, let's go serve it. Let's go serve it. Dude, we kick the door down. We recover probably about, I don't know, I'd say over 120 bundles of cocaine, 80 bundles of heroin, $2,000, a gun, and we get all these people in custody. So now it's the end of the shift. We have to give the reports to the sergeant. It was called 1017. So I get there with a search warrant. I get there and he's like, what is this? I go, hey, Sarge, you know what? Look at my log. I answered all my radio calls. I did a burglary. He goes, but in between, we got this search warrant. Dude, I thought he was going to fire me. And next thing you know, 6 months later, he gives me a commanding officer citation. It was a pretty high command. And he goes, the captain called me in the office. He goes, if you ever do this again, you're fired. And I go, okay, I'm sorry. I didn't know I was supposed to. I do. But what I'm trying to say is, you know what? I only had 8 months on. I don't think anybody's ever done that.
Yeah, so how much... Okay, so I can see them going, yeah, you might be fired, but you're brand new.
Yeah.
Are your partners getting yelled at?
You know what? I don't know what happened to them. I didn't throw them under, you know what I mean? But believe it or not, one of them, that dirty, rotten bastard, was pissed because he never got a commendation. He was pissed because of that. He was like, hey, man, why did Contreras get it? We're the ones that wrote it for him, but I wrote it. But they gave me the wording.
That's such a great story,
only 8 months on.
That's such a great story.
It is, yeah. And I have the COC where you could actually read it to prove it. It's not a story. This is something that really happened. Yeah.
So I think what was really interesting is later on, you go right after patrol, you'd go to community relations.
Yeah, I did 4 years in patrol.
Okay.
Working Logan Heights with the Logan Heights Calle 30 gang members, and then I volunteered to go to community relations for a year and a half, because now I've arrested you. I've already cleaned up a lot of the streets, and not all the streets, but I know what it's like. Now, how can I help you keep the streets clean. And I went to community relations in Logan Heights at the time.
Gosh, that's so
Yeah.
interesting. So as I'm listening to some of these other interviews, you really, unlike maybe some other officers, you really established a rapport with your community.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah.
I have to imagine that,
Yeah.
I'm watching these shows in LA trying to solve homicides and stuff, and you're not getting any community help whatsoever. I've got to imagine in your situation, that's helping everybody.
Yes.
Why? Okay, so why do that? Why do you think that was? It's still the same thing. Getting back to the prisons and your counseling, you just had that in you to establish that relationship and not be a hard ass with everybody.
You know what? I think it's the pastor in me, my dad, as an example, that the community loved him. When my dad died, there was 4,000 people at his funeral.
Wow.
The people loved my dad. And I'm not saying that I'm not my dad.
Yeah.
And I didn't do it because of my dad. I just think that I looked at it as another form of policing. You know what I mean? Okay, yeah, we could lock you up. And yeah, we used to hit, when community policing first came out, problem-oriented policing, community-oriented policing, POP, people were against it. My squad and I, we were already doing that. We knew that it ain't just locking people up, because we would hit a house full of illegal migrants, illegal aliens that were dealing dope. We'd take 10 of them to jail. The following day, Arellanos would send 10 more illegals. So it was a revolving door. So now when community-oriented policing came in, we not only took them to jail, but we went after the property. You know what I mean? That's what community-oriented policing is. We go after the property. We went after the owner. We demolished apartment complexes. So I had that already in me. So now I brought that to the community, and I was able, I had him once again, like I said, I've been very good at cultivating not only informants, but relationships. So I gave me a year and a half to really build strong relationships in the community that were very strong. Up to this day, I could call certain individuals. If I know there's something that I need or they need, they'll call me, because we built those relationships, and they were a blessing.
Maybe you can't explain how you do this though. But you're on patrol, and people are actually, they recognize you. They're happy to see you in a patrol car, where another patrol car might go by and they're spitting at them. They could get shot, whatever else, and they don't like them. What do you think that you were doing in particularly different than these other officers?
You know what? It wasn't just me. It was my partner, Van Cruz.
Okay.
And later on, Van Cruz is probably one of the best sergeants that San Diego PD has ever had, without a doubt, because we were fair. We were fair. You know what I mean? We were fair, and we knew how to talk to people. You know what I mean? We knew how to talk to people. And I think that a lot of cops, even back then, I'm not going to go into today because I don't know what the new generation's doing, but we would stop and talk to them, laugh with them, play basketball with them. We're talking about 1991, 1992, when everybody was hardcore, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Dude, we were literally shooting balls with them. Hey man, how's your dad? For Christmas, one of us would dress like Santa Claus in the patrol car without telling our sergeant and go give gifts. We would literally do that.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a squad thing. It was just him and I.
Yeah.
So people knew that, but I was also a jokester because, like I said, Calle 30, that's a hardcore street gang. I was also that guy that as I'm driving by, because I came out of the joint, I know there's a big war between North and South. I would be on there, and then sometimes I would have my oldies on, and I would play Sitting in the Park as we're driving by over the speakers, and all the homeboys would be going, Orale Contreras, they'd be laughing, but hey, they shoot me too, trust me.
Yeah.
Just because they were laughing with me, they had the opportunity. They're killers.
Yeah.
We didn't trust them. They didn't trust us. But there was a mutual respect. But at the same time, as we're driving by, I would literally put oldies on. They'd all get all fired up. I would go, Orale, puro norte, which means, hey, this is North. They hate North. Oh, fuck you, Contreras. But we would all laugh.
Yeah.
Because they knew that, you know what? But when it came time to take care of business, they knew.
Yeah.
They would run. If they had a gun and I would stop, and later on, I couldn't catch them because they were in there. They were in their barrio. They knew where to hide. Yeah. Later on, I go, hey, motherfucker, why'd you run? Because I'd snatch them 3 days later. You know why, Contreras. And I go, what did you have? He goes, you know why, Contreras. They probably had a gun. They probably had PCP.
Yeah.
You know, and they had to do what they had to do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we knew that, you know, and vice versa.
Tell me the gang situation in San Diego at the time. I'm a kid, so I have no idea what's going around. But
dude.
obviously, as a cop,
Yeah.
you see stuff that people don't see. So what was
Yeah.
going on at the time?
I was working Calle 30 at the time, Logan Heights, and that's the gang that the Arellano cartel came across the border and recruited to become hitmen. All these guys, that's where they were originally, Calle 30, and I knew all these kids before they became hitmen. I knew every one of those kids, and they knew me and my partner Van Cruz. The gang, you go to Bonita, you went to Bonita. And if I went into an assembly there, and I would get up there at Bonita Vista Junior High School, and I say, how many of you have ever seen a dead body? Please raise your hand. And maybe out of 2,000 kids, maybe 15 would say, my grandmother died and I went to her funeral. You go to Logan Elementary School and you tell them, how many of you have seen? When? That'd be the question, when? The guy that's overdosed or the guy that was shot last night. How many of you ever heard a helicopter over your house at Bonita Vista Junior High School? Only when the military flies by. You go to Logan Heights every night. When? What time? You know what I mean? And the police helicopter flying. So what I'm trying to say, how many of you ever seen somebody die with a needle in their arm in Bonita Vista? What is a needle and what's an arm? You know what I mean? You go to Logan Heights when? You know? Yeah. So yes, during that time, for the first time, and I'm going to say in San Diego, I believe it was 1991, 1992, one of the main leaders from the Logan Heights gang set was murdered, and Beto Vasquez. And the following day, David Barron came from Mexico. I don't know how he got across, probably through a tunnel. He was one of the hitmen for the Arellano cartel, went to Shelltown and shot up a couple of houses with an AK-47. Back then it was a 45, maybe 20, always 22, maybe 9mm, lucky 45, always shotguns. First time houses with AK-47s because his best friend, his little best friend, Menti, was murdered by Shelltown. So I was there during that time with the drive-by shootings. You'd be driving by, bah, 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 and all of a sudden the radio would come on. We were to be there because we were down the street when the shootings came down. So that was common in San Diego at that time. It was common.
Officer David Contreras of the San Diego Police Department says the gang is notorious for armed clashes with other gangs and for drug dealing.
We arrested numerous members of this gang for the sales and the possession and the use of PCP.
Was it predominantly Hispanic gangs? Were the Crips and Bloods? Were the ABs? Was it broken down by neighborhoods? How did it work?
Yes, in San Diego, you have the gang sets. You have gang sets broken down by neighborhoods. And in the blacks also, you have the West Coast Crips, you have neighborhood Crips, you got blood sets. So they're all broken down by neighborhoods. And when the Hispanics were going off, the blacks were going off. I mean, West Coast Crip, I mean, they were fighting against the Bloods. And, oh, dude, there was, I mean, innocent people were getting shot. During the early 90s, San Diego was a bloodbath. And then there was another gang set that was coming up they were called Lincoln Park. These guys were literally blowing up courthouses downtown. You see, people don't talk about that. Blowing up a courthouse. I mean, literally courthouses. These guys, they killed a cop, one of our police officers. They murdered him, shot him, Jerry Heartless. I mean, dude, the late 80s, early 90s, PCP, San Diego, that whole area, it was blowing up. Nothing like today.
So was PCP the main drug?
Actually, within the Chicanos, yes, PCP. And then I also went through the meth. Before meth, it was rock cocaine. The main drug among blacks and Hispanics that weren't gang members was meth. Was rock cocaine, then meth. In the Chicano, in the barrio, it was PCP. And I don't know if I know you were DEA. If you ever had a chance to fight against somebody that's under the influence of PCP, you did? So you know what I'm talking about. Dude, I could tell you stories after stories. When I was working Logan Heights, fights that we got with a guy that's 5'3", maybe 130 pounds, named Chino, where we broke almost every bone of their body. And after breaking almost every bone of their body, still handcuffed, we're taking him to the hospital. And on the way to the hospital, he's literally breaking with his head. He's mangled. He's breaking with his head the the window, and by the time we get to the hospital, the window's broken and he has shattered glass, literally going into. He looked like hamburger meat, all because he's under the influence of PCP. I'm telling you, we went through that era when all of a sudden you're driving down 30th and National, and all of a sudden a black guy, all of a sudden jumps into on your hood of your police car at 3 a.m. He's naked and he's challenged you to a fight because he's under the influence of PCP, and he's naked, and you know what? You don't get out of your car. Dude, you call for backup and it takes 10 of us to take this skinny guy down. I went through that era.
Do you know, I was always curious about this. Do you know why gangs are broken down by race? Why aren't there Hispanic black gangs or black white gangs? Why has it always been broken down by race?
Well, you know what there is. There are certain gang sets. I mean, like Del Sol. They had a couple of black guys that grew up in the barrio. It's basically Hispanic gang sets. I mean, they go back to the 30s. They go back to the 20s. They're neighborhoods. You know what I mean? They're neighborhoods, and it's usually Hispanic neighborhoods. But it also goes deeper than that. Inside state prisons, all the races are segregated. You got the whites, you got the Hispanics, and you have the blacks, and you have the Asians, very small. But the blacks don't eat and don't sleep and don't associate with the Hispanics. The Hispanics don't associate with the blacks or the whites. They're segregated. So that segregation comes from the prison system.
Yeah.
So now let's say, for example, Babalu, he was from Shelltown. I mean, from Del Sol. Babalu, he's a stone Chicano gangster from Shelltown, from Del Sol. He goes in the county jail. They will give him a break because he is part of Del Sol. But there's very few. Now, let's say, for example, West Coast Crip, they have a Hispanic there. Dude, the blacks will sometimes say, get away from me. And the Hispanics will say, get away from me. That guy's on his own. But yet you have one gang set, Linda Vista, LV13, because it's a multiracial area, so they'll have Asians, Hispanics, and black Crips. But you know what? But they're accepted there.
Yeah.
There. But with the minute they hit prison, dude, they're not accepted. They have to go to the race.
So that's what we're in this melting pot, which is America. But when you get into prison, it's only divided by race.
In the state of California.
But
yeah,
I think that's the way it is through other prisons throughout the country, right?
Yes.
Why do you think that is?
Well, because you know what? They've divided themselves. I mean, we're talking about generations and generations, and there's hate, there's anger, there's bias. I mean, these guys are criminals.
Yeah.
They're criminals. But what I said with the feds, you have the Latin Kings. Latin Kings, they're black, they're Puerto Rican, they're what do you call them, from Haiti. They're a melting pot. But in California, dude. In California, you're a Chicano or you're a border brother. They call them border brothers. Okay. A paisa. Okay. And you know what? If you want to survive in California State Prison and you're from a neighborhood, claim paisa. If you're a paisa, the sureños are going to try to recruit you. The Mexican mafia is not going to mess with you because you're a paisa. You're from Mexico. They have their own little group. Yeah. So even the Mexicans aren't united. You would think that all no. The Chicanos can't stand the paisas. The paisas, they're their own group inside state prison. So a lot of guys speak perfect English when they hit prison. Hey, I'm paisa. Nobody messes with them. Yeah.
You go from community relations to gangs. Why did you want to do that?
Because you know what? Gangs has always been a part of me. I worked at Calle 30. I worked it in the joint. Okay. Even though I worked at New Life, I was the director of this program. I dealt with gang members. I mean, I grew up with gang members. I had cousins that were gang members. You know what I mean? I've been around gangs all my life. I just never became a gang member because I always wanted to be a cop. That's what saved me, because I could have easily became a gang member. But you know what? I always wanted to be a cop. That's what saved me, to be honest with you. Not the religion, it was I wanted to be a cop.
It had to have helped, though, having strong parents.
Right? Of course. Yeah. Oh, my mom's prayers, my dad being a strong man, of course it did. Yeah.
I'm curious, brothers and sisters?
I have two sisters. I have an older sister and a younger sister.
And what did they end up doing?
My younger sister worked for the California Department of Corrections as a correctional officer. She's just retired. I got her in, and my older sister, she's like my father. Her and her husband are they pastor a mega church in Rancho Cucamonga. They have hundreds of churches in Colombia, Japan. They're Sam Valverde. He is a dynamic speaker, a man of God, a man that really practices what he preaches. And then my sister, I mean, she walks into a room, she lights it up. They became what my father was. They became, but at a different level.
Yeah.
My dad had a church of 500, 400 people. My brother has a church of 5,000.
Did you have any pressure on you when you were growing up to become a preacher?
Oh, of course. Of course. I mean, I think I lived a lot. After I left the church in 84, I lived for 36 years with a lot of guilt because my father wanted me to, I was his only son. I was supposed to be the pastor of the church.
Yeah.
And like I was telling you earlier, when my father died on January 8th, 2009, I was holding his hand when he was taking his last breath. And the last words that he heard me say, instead of saying, most people say, I love you, Dad. My last words is, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And my sorriness was that I didn't become a pastor like him. But now that I rededicated my life to the Lord 3 years ago, I know that I was a pastor just with a badge.
Yeah.
Because I helped a lot of people. And there were times, even though, like I said, I was, partying, whatever, but God never left. There were times that I had dudes in the back of the car, I'd have them crying. And I would talk to them about God. I would actually talk to them, say, you know what, man, the only way you're going to change a heroin addict is God, dude, God. But, I wasn't practicing it, but it never left me. I left it, but it never left me.
At some point in your career, you decide to promote. You
become a sergeant. Yes.
Why?
You know what? Because number one, I more money, and number two, I've always liked to mentor people.
Okay.
I was not only a protector of the weak, but also mentoring. I'm a helper. I always wanted to help people, and the majority of the people, maybe there's a lot of people worked with me. I say work with me, not for me. Work with me. I'd say probably, let's just say 80 people work for me, there's probably gonna be one or two that are gonna say, oh, that guy fucked me or whatever, because they were lazy. You know what I mean? And I couldn't help them. They were lazy or they were liars or whatever. Yeah. But the other, I guarantee you, the other 78 are gonna tell you, I'm where I'm at today. And I say this humbly when I say this. I'm where I'm at today because Contreras helped me get there.
Where do you think your leadership skills came from?
I think they came from my father.
Okay.
I think they came from my father, and I think they came through experience, and also through experience. How do I want to be treated?
So I always ask this about supervisors. Leadership, innate or learned, or is it a combination?
I think circumstantial.
Okay.
I think circumstantial.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think it's a combination too. I think you're born with it. I think that you learn it, because when I go to leadership schools, I never learned much. You know what I mean? I think it's circumstantial. Circumstances make you the leader that you are. Experience.
Because what I can't ever figure out, David, are those guys who get promoted who just treat their people poorly.
Yes.
I don't understand that. And I don't understand why they haven't learned that along the way. Hey, if I treat my guys well, they're going to want to work harder for me then. So I never really understood that.
I'll tell you why. Well, my opinion is they weren't gunslingers. You know what I mean? There's a difference between an administrator and a gunslinger. A gunslinger understands the streets, understands the job. It's not a career for them. It's not a job. It's a career. And you know what? When you love what you do, and I'll tell you, and I've said this on many interviews, and I'll tell you, like I tell everybody else, I was a cop for 32 years, and you know what? I never worked one day of my life. And because you know what? You love the people that you work. Dude, I hate child molesters. I hate hardcore drug addicts. I hate predators. You know what I mean? And that's why I think I was good at what I do, because I hate them, but at the same time, I love the people that I was defending. I love the abuelita that lived in the neighborhood. I love the kids that lived. I love the family that was there, because I was there to defend them. And I think a lot of the guys that you're describing, they were never gunslingers. And a gunslinger doesn't mean you're involved in 12 shootings. No, a gunslinger is, you know what? You're there to help. And if you can't have that feeling, then how can you have that feeling for your subordinate when you don't have that feeling for the community that you're paid to serve?
It's so interesting because as you're saying this, I'm going through, and I didn't have too many bad supervisors.
Yeah.
I was very, very lucky. But the guys that weren't that good weren't gunslingers.
No, they weren't. Of course not. They were not. And the guys that were not that good, guess what? They don't suffer from PTSD like I do.
Yeah.
The gunslingers, it's us gunslingers. You know what I mean? That
Yeah.
it wasn't a job.
Yeah.
It was a passion.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's us. So yeah. Yeah.
How do you end up as the assistant to the chief?
Well, what happened was the chief of police has always had liaisons for various communities. They had a liaison. San Diego PD has always been, the chiefs have been visionaries, and they've always had liaisons, groups that they meet with on a monthly basis. Like, for example, San Diego PD has a liaison for the Latino community, has a liaison for the gay and lesbian community, has a liaison for the Asian Pacific Islander, for the African American community. And when I was selected to be the liaison for the Latino community, because as being a chief of police, you need to know exactly what the community's, what need the pulse of the community. So the chief would meet with these advisory boards on a monthly basis that were comprised of businessmen, community leaders, community activists that hated the police, religious leaders, and just community members. Those 5 things, they were comprised of that. So when I became the liaison to the Latino community, we were having a lot of shootings in the Latino community. And those activists were the first to march against the Black community. So while I'm there, this is in 2001, I just made sergeant, work patrol for about a year, and then I get transferred there. They were having a lot of problems, shootings in the Latino community. So what I did, I started getting these leaders, these activists, and bringing them to meet with the chief. So they weren't just yes people. These people were people that were marching against the department. What was my expertise? Cultivating people, informants. So they didn't become my informants, but to them it was more cultivating relationships. But during that time, during that 2001, we started really seeing things starting to pick up with the Arab American community in 2000, before 9/11, Arab American community and the Jewish community. So I met with my chief, David Bejarano at the time, and I told him, I go, hey chief, I go, you know what, things are heating up. I go, do you mind if I basically start a new advisory board for you, community group between the Arab American and the Jewish American? Because I never thought about it yet. Please do it. So I ended up, through his vision, I ended up basically forming 2 advisory boards, but I put them together. So I had imams. If you're familiar with San Diego, the imam from the mosque off of 805 in Genesee, one of the biggest mosques, he was on my advisory board. A rabbi from the biggest synagogue in La Jolla. I had business leaders, community leaders. So I had 15 of each. The Hispanics would meet together. With the Blacks would meet together. Leaders, gay and lesbians would meet together. With the Pacific Islanders. This group, I wasn't going to have just the Jews meet with him or the Arabs. I put them together in the same room with the chief. So literally they'd walk in, Jewish people sit here, the Arabs would sit here, chief would sit there, I'd sit over here, I'd introduce them, what are the problems? And back then they wanted sensitivity training and so forth. Dude, by the 6th month, they were all sitting next to each other. They were sitting. Now, the interesting part of this is right after that, 9/11 happens, right? 9/11 happens. Guess what? The FBI had, I know you're not going to believe this, but Bill Gore was the FBI SAC at the time. He calls Bejarano the day that 9/11 happened at 9:30 in the morning, our time, which was 11:30 Eastern time. Who do you have in the Arab community? Who do you have in the Arab community? And David Bejarano goes, I have so-and-so, I got the imam, he goes, I need to meet with them. FBI came to San Diego PD, came for us to meet with the community. They had informants, but they didn't have people that wanted to be there.
Yeah.
So we immediately called an emergency meeting. I had 30 people there. Gore comes in, they talk, and only God knows what information he got, but he developed a relationship with them. Later, a year later, I handed that, because it was too much responsibility, I handed it over to Brian Goldberg and Tony El Assis, which was Lebanese at the time. So they took over those groups, and I stayed with the Latino community. So working there for 4 years, I'll tell you, I got the chance, just like I did community relations, to build relationships. Every time there was a shooting, anything that would happen, I would let not the incidents, but the after effect incidents, the protesting, dude, they went almost zero during that time with the Latino community, because I kept them abreast and I was there. They knew that they could call me to get right to Bejarano's ears.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it was a good learning experience.
Yeah. After you're the assistant to the chief, why go to internal affairs? I always think you're talking about you're a gunslinger and everything else. I always think kind of some slugs are in the IA.
Yeah.
Why do you go?
You know what? I go because that's my way to become a detective sergeant.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was a sergeant, and to become a detective sergeant, and you have to be a detective. I wasn't a detective, so become a detective sergeant, I had to go to internal affairs.
So
I was there for 2 years.
So what's your experience there in IA?
Oh, it was terrible. It was terrible, dude. I hated it. You know what?
Is it terrible because you're just answering calls you think are nonsense, or is it because there's some legitimate stuff and you don't like what's going on? Tell me.
You know, I think it's a little bit of both.
Okay.
I think we did some criminal cases, some really good criminal cases. Back then, internal affairs wouldn't do criminal. It was during that time that they established a group called Professional Standards Unit that did criminal cases. Actually, they did, but we would hand them over to them. But there was one criminal case that I actually did that it was righteous. This officer was robbing illegal aliens. And they gave me the case because Spanish speaker, and I understood the community. I had this guy dead to rights. The district attorney at the time would not file. And that was heartbreaking for me, because I had a solid case because they were illegal, and they didn't think at the time, the district attorney's office, that they were going to win the case based on their statements. And this guy was dirty. He ended up later on getting fired. I had 3 cases on him, on a gang member, and also one of my victims was a hardcore gang member that this guy had stole $500 from his shoe. All my victims, very few people did that. I had my victims polygraphed. I mean, very few people do the victim polygraph. I had my victims because I knew the district attorney was not going to file just because they were illegal at the time. You know what I mean? And it was against a police officer.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that all their cases, but on that one case and gang member. So I had in prison. I had to take, the guy was in prison. I had to take the polygrapher to prison to go, or at the camp. He was a juvenile at the time, to get polygraphed with his parents' consent and so forth. But so that was one. You know, the majority of them were complaints, fabricated complaints.
I was going to
Yes,
ask you, how
yes.
often do you think, give me a percentage of how many complaints come in that are just total nonsense?
98%.
Really?
Yes, 98%. He called me the N-word. You know what? During my traffic stop, he threw my driver's license. You know what I mean? And a couple of those, this is before the cameras. That's why whenever you hear cops say, oh, the cameras are bullshit, why? I wish when I came on in '89 that I had cameras.
Yeah.
It would have saved me a lot of trips going to internal affairs, because that camera, use of force that I would get, or whatever that they investigated, that would have definitely, without a doubt, exonerated me.
Yeah.
You know, those cameras, I mean, after I left, the cameras came, and I was, man, I could have cleared that case easily with a videotape.
Yeah, yeah.
I'd say probably about 98% are either fabricated or there was a misunderstanding, and I couldn't prove it. I mean, it was only the officer and the person, and if he did use, I mean, I can't sustain it. You know what I mean? So it's unsustained.
Yeah.
But I think that 98% they were trying to get out of a ticket. You know what I mean? But there is that 1%. There is, to me, that 2% were the officer. And you know what? And if I caught him, you know what? I'm not going to hide it. But everybody seems to think that internal affairs is after you. They're not. Now, in patrol or as a cop, you have that 2%, like I said earlier, that had their money taken. You know what I mean? Had their lunch money taken as kids.
Yeah.
And you have that 2% in internal affairs. We knew who those guys were.
The 2%, any sort of pattern that you could see of why they ended up turning out bad? I mean, here's a question. Do you think those 2% never should have been cops in the first place?
No, I'm talking about the 2% investigators. I'm talking about the guys in internal affairs that are the investigators. Now,
Okay.
instead of being a prick to the public,
Yes.
now who put them in internal affairs? We knew they were pricks to the public. And now they're in internal affairs.
Got it.
And these guys see another cop as they saw the public. They're full of hate. They're full of anger.
Got it.
So that's why we in internal affairs, we knew who they were. And we would tell them, he was the kind, there was two that I remember. And guess what? They were both short little guys, little pricks. You know, the little man complex. You know what I mean? I tell you, two that have come to mind. They were both under 5'6". Little white guys, little pricks. You know what I mean? Little Hitlers. You know what I mean? And we knew these guys when we'd all sit in a table and we'd go around the case, and he couldn't sustain the allegation. So guess what? Conduct and becoming. They would always find, and they would dig. They should have never been in internal affairs, just like they should have never been cops. It's these little pricks that got people hurt as a cop.
Yeah.
These little pricks are the ones that got people shot as cops. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but now they've promoted, I don't know how, but they did, and now they're internal affairs. So whenever I would hear one of my friends, for example, would say, hey, I got so-and-so, oh no. I would just say, you know what, get a good attorney or get a good POA. And the lieutenants would know who these guys were. You know, they should have never been in internal affairs. And I'm hoping that somebody's watching the show today. If you're an active cop and you know that they're there, hopefully a chief of police is going to remove those little pricks out of internal affairs, because there's always one or two. Or maybe you don't. You're lucky if you don't.
Yeah.
But there's always that little guy that had his money taken. They're always little.
What?
No disrespect, but these two, I got them here.
What about this? Okay, I understand the 2%, but what about the legitimate investigations that you were doing in IA with cops that were doing things bad? When those things happen, did you ever establish any sort of pattern of, like, maybe the guys should never have been cops, but what was it that kind of made him go bad, if you know?
You know what? Divorce.
Really?
When I was working in narcotics, we were, at my last year and a half, we were getting seizures of $600,000. I'm not exaggerating. As a narcotics team, we were, we were hitting it big. And the minute that I would see one of my cops going through a divorce, I would either sit down with them and I tell them, hey, I'm going to keep my eye on you, because I know I went through a divorce. I know exactly what you're going through. You need extra cash, and you're never thought about stealing. You've never thought about, I need this. You know what I mean? You never justified. That's why it's very important for sergeants that are working narcotics, sergeants that are working specialized units, to know their people, to know them, because you know what? A person that is in need will do drastic things. I don't care if he's the best cop in the world, but divorce, I would always look at them. And I would always, believe it or not, look at also if they were cheaters. They were cheating on their wife. Yeah. I'm not judging them because I was there. Yeah. But I'm telling you, to sustain a certain livelihood, you need extra cash. Yeah. You know what I mean? And you as a cop, you need to be very careful, because you could literally in your mind justify stealing from a cartel guy or from a drug deal, thinking, hey, it's not his money, and you know what, I need to pay this off. You know what I mean? So as a supervisor, that's why I'm telling you, that 2%, remember I told you, will probably say, Contreras moved me. Well, yes, I did. And I probably saved your job. Yeah. Because you know what? You learn these things. Because I went through it. I never stole anything, but I know what it's like. I saw people that I work with become that. So I learned from that. And you look at all these guys like Ruben Palomares, great guy, but it was after he wasn't. I mean, if you Ruben Palomares, he's a LAPD cop, did 17 years. The movie Training Day was based on his life story. But when I've talked to him, it always starts with, I needed extra money. He didn't start being dirty. He didn't come in. He came in with the sheep heart. The sheepdog attitude, but it was circumstances. So you as a supervisor, me as a supervisor, I'm telling you, I was always looking for that. And I will tell any sergeant, don't become best friends with the people you're with, because there's going to come a time you're going to have to discipline them, and they're going to understand. And watch them. Look at their personal life. That's what I saw, that patterns of behavior.
Okay. I think it's fair to say during your career, your bread and butter was the CIU unit.
Oh, without a doubt.
Okay, so tell the audience what CIU stands for. What were you guys doing?
CIU was a criminal intelligence unit. San Diego PD has, without a doubt, I don't know about now, we had the best in the nation. I mean, when I was not promoted, but when I was asked to go to CIU, the first thing my lieutenant did was, Andy Mills is now the chief of police with Palm Springs Police Department. As a matter of fact, in 2 weeks, I'm going to have on my show Ash Wednesday just a special episode on Andy Mills. Andy Mills is that guy that if you need to interview him. You need to interview him. Andy Mills is that guy that I would say 20 years from now, but you know what? If I see my grandchildren next week and they ask me, tell me a story about a hero, that's what I'm going to talk about. Andy Mills. Tell me a story about a guy that, one of the best that you ever worked around with. I'm going to talk about Andy Mills. Andy Mills was my lieutenant at the time in criminal intelligence. Criminal intelligence unit, it's a specialized unit. It's an undercover unit. It's a hush-hush unit. The chief needs something done, he goes to criminal intelligence. Everything that we do is on a need-to-know basis. I mean, it's like CIA, but within a department. It's criminal intelligence. They have different investigators. There's some that investigate prison gangs, Russian mafia. They investigate the Cosa Nostra. They investigate all these protesters that are protesting against the police department. They investigate them. But one of the strongest points that we had, San Diego PD, because we're close to the border, was Mexico Liaison. And it was a team that would literally cross the border every day. And their job was to be a liaison between the Mexican, and I'm talking about not only Tijuana Police Department, but the Mexican people, law enforcement, politicians, and the United States. And when I talk about the United States, I'm talking about New York PD, Washington, D.C., Mossad, CIA. I mean, I'm telling you, I could tell you stories about people that I made contact in the United States that needed information in Mexico, that I was able to provide them that information. So that's Mexico Liaison.
Okay, so what year are you doing this?
I get transferred there 2009.
Okay, so what I find so fascinating about this is I've interviewed some DEA guys that are working in Mexico at the time, and I understand federal agencies working in different countries. How are you guys able to work that out with another country and work in Tijuana?
We're not representing the federal government. And you know what? By them being federal agents, they have a lot more restrictions than we do. And if we probably have the same restrictions, but we don't know about them, we're municipal police officers crossing that international border. We don't come in with their, under the embassy. We come in under the San Diego. We're not there under the embassy.
But who's allowing you to go in like that?
Our chief of police.
But from
America.
Tijuana?
No, from the San Diego Police Department. We've, throughout the years, San Diego PD has had a liaison team probably since 1950.
Really?
Oh, yeah. We've always had a liaison team.
Okay.
But every liaison team has been different. Some liaison teams were just there to go and meet people. Other liaison teams were just there to go get drunk. Other liaison teams were just there to go get women. I mean, I'm talking about 1950s, 60s. Yeah. So there's been my liaison team. When I got recruited, we were trained by the CIA. I mean, Andy Mills, literally, the first thing he did was hand me a book. It's called Gideon's Army, or Gideon's. Yeah, I think it's Gideon's Army. It's about the Mossad. And Andy Mills, he was one of the, I guess, not the founders, but one of the gurus of intelligence-led policing. So when Andy Mills took over the unit, he goes, you guys are not just the liaison. Liaison's your front. He goes, you're going in there with a purpose and with a mission. Your purpose and mission is cultivate informants. We're having kidnappings right now in San Diego, and they're coming from Mexico. Cultivate who's doing it. Right now, you're there to cultivate informants. And I read that book, and after I read that book, I go, okay, I know my mission. He goes, now you need training. He brought retired CIA guys over to San Diego, rented a hotel. We were with them for a week. We did all kinds of espionage training. I mean, we went in there, San Diego PD, criminal intelligence, not the whole unit, Mexico Liaison. We went in with a mission, and our mission was to cultivate informants. That was our mission.
But you weren't doing it without some sort of permission from Mexican authorities.
No, not at all. Because we've already established since 1950s a liaison.
Okay.
They see, like I said, every team, and when I talk about teams, talking about generations, had different missions.
Yeah.
So when they saw me, they thought, oh, here comes another taco drinking team. Dude, I worked Mexico Liaison for 4.5, close to 5 years. I never had one drink in Mexico. My team never had one. The team before us, dude, they'll tell you stories. They used to get drunk down there. My team, not one drink. I had a budget, a couple of $1,000. And that budget that I had, guess what it was for? To buy them drinks, to buy them dinner. And when they would, hey, a tequila shot, yeah, dude, we would fake it. I would have a tequila shot, and right before it went under, I threw it under the table, and oh yeah, and you dude, it was mission oriented. So now my team was very different. You bring somebody from San Diego PD that worked liaison in 1991, and they probably did great things. But you ask them, hey man, we got drunk with those guys. We had a wonderful time. You know what I mean? And they probably had a wonderful time. My team was very different. My team, now the team that's there now is probably very different after I left. But the guy that took over after I did came in with the same mentality. Guys, we're there. Every time we crossed that border, there was a reason why. If we got invited to the inauguration of the new mayor, I would assign my guys. I would say, you know what? I want this congressman's going to be there. This senator's going to be there. I want you to go sit at their table. We wouldn't sit together. And they would get pissed off at me because, we're very cliquish. So when I would get there, I would purposely have them sit with this senator, and their job was to recruit that senator. Their job was to recruit that congressman. And I'm not talking about recruiting to get personal secrets.
Yeah.
It's get to know them, because if we need something from a state prison in Chiapas, I got that senator that I could call to. So, I mean, there was a businessman there that was very powerful, that owned Caliente. I would go sit with him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I needed that man, not because I wanted a favor, but because if something ever happens, I know that I have his direct number, and I could... And oh, dude, I'd scare the crap out of him. And the funny thing about this is, working in Mexico, people always talk about America being prejudiced. Dude, nothing like Mexico. Nothing like Mexico is so prejudiced. And I'm going to tell you why. I had a guy named Jaime Dickinson that worked for me. Jaime Dickinson was like, I'm 5'11". He was 5'11", weighed about 300 pounds at the time. He was a pretty big guy, big boy. But he was very white complected. He looked like Santa Claus. Very, very white complected. He looked American. And he was my detective. And he would drive for me the majority of the time. He would drive, and I would have Oscar in the back. And we'll talk about that. And I would be, the front passenger, and we drive to these meetings. When we would get there, the new chiefs of police, the secretary of public safety for the state or federal police, or even the military, when we go meet with a general, the initial meeting, guess who they would come and hug first? Not me. Dude, they would go and hug him. That thought he was the commander. Because he was light-skinned.
Wow.
He was and then Dickinson, Señor Dickinson, mucho gusto. And then all of a sudden he would say, oh, and by the way, here's my boss. Bald-headed, tattooed, Mexican. They would go, you know what I mean? Because I'm dark.
Yeah.
Dark complected.
Yeah.
They would see me as, I should have been the driver.
So give the audience an
Yeah.
idea of what kind of cases you were working.
Oh,
down
we
there.
did all kinds of cases. I mean, when I first got there, like I said, I had talked to the sergeant before, and the sergeant before, his message was go over there. I remember him saying, a beer, and carne asada or a fish taco will get you anything you want. Those were his three basically lessons. That will get you anything you want. Good luck. Thank you. Goodbye. After reading that book and after getting the training that we did before we hit the streets, dude, a fish taco isn't going to get me what I want. A beer's not going to get me, and a tequila shot's not going to get me what we want. It's building relationships.
Yeah.
It's establishing relationships. So once I got there, and then I started getting calls like from New York PD, Green Bay PD, from different departments, Long Beach PD. Hey, we're looking for this homicide suspect. Can you help us? Yes. So then I started already established relationships with the state police, federal police, with the military, and so forth. But one of the things you're going to find it very interesting. Hopefully, I'll send you when we do this episode on Andy Mills. During the time that I was there was a new chief of police named Lieutenant Colonel Julian Leizaola. And if you watch the Netflix special on him, I think it's called Mexico's Hero or Mexico something. It's a really good special on him. This guy's a hero in Mexico. He declared war on the Arellano cartel and on Sinaloa cartel. During the 2009, when I was there, they killed 35 municipal police officers. 35. Out of the 35, I think I went to 15 or 17 funerals of those police officers. In 1 year, they declared war on him. And I was there. I was there when a lot of them were shot. We heard the shots a block away. We get there, the guy's laying there, shot in the head. And what I'm trying to say is, so we started building those relationships, but we didn't have a relationship with the military. One time, I believe they killed 3 officers at one time. So they didn't want to have this funeral where they usually had them. There was like in the middle of like a park that would have them there. Mm-hmm. This one, there was 3, and this was a very personal one. So they had it at the military base. And the military base, there was a general there, Huerta was his name, I believe. And he would only allow DEA, FBI, and what was it? It wasn't ICE at the time, CBP. He would only allow them, Americans, to go on that base. San Diego PD, we were just Mexican, we were just cops. We were never allowed. But because the funeral was going to be there, Leizaola invited us. We couldn't go on the military base. We were just cops. We're there. Mm-hmm. We were cops.
Yeah.
What I did, I talked to Andy Mills. I go, Andy, if you could go with us, but you go in uniform across the border to this funeral, I need to know this general because DEA is not sharing them with us. FBI is not sharing them. That's their little cookie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I need to know him because if I ever need the military, these other guys, they're dirty. This guy might be able to help me save somebody, you or somebody. And he goes, I'll go. So without asking our chief of police, Lansdowne, Andy, we put him in a car. As soon as we crossed the border, we had armed security because, they were killing cops in uniform. He's in a police uniform, no gun. Police uniform. We escorted him up to the military base. When we get there, Leizaola, which was the chief of police at the time, former lieutenant colonel, walks in and he goes, Mr. General, I know that no municipal cops from America have ever been here, but can you make exception to the rule? The commander in charge of their intel unit is here, and he's in uniform, and he wants to give honor and respect to our brethren. And the general, for the first time, says, yes, let him in. He goes up to Andy, hugs him. Andy introduces me. I introduced my team. We became best of friends. That door, once that door was open, I could tell you stories that will blow your mind away. Once that door was open, and so now this happens. There's newspaper reporters here. They blasted all over Tijuana, all over San Diego. San Diego, they called him chief of police. He wasn't chief. He was a lieutenant.
Yeah.
Chief of police from San Diego goes and they show him there talking to the family, shaking hands with the 3 dead bodies or the 3 caskets. As soon as the following day, we had to go brief Lansdowne. So on a Thursday, as we walk in, Lansdowne was our chief of police. Lansdowne goes, "Mills, get in my fucking office." So Mills, Handy goes, "Guys, I'll be right back." Right? And he knew. He yelled at him. He goes, "Don't you ever, ever." He goes, "Who did you ask permission to go there?" And he goes, "I didn't ask anybody permission." He goes, "Why did you do it?" He goes, "Because it had to be done because we need a liaison with the Mexican military. This general now has an open door." He goes, "I don't care. You do that again, I'm going to demote you. I'm going to get you out of." He got in trouble because of that. But let me tell you what happened. After that, the door was open. He would call me to go have breakfast with him, to go have lunch with him.
Wow.
And anytime I needed the military for an operation, I would call him direct. I had his direct number. The only people that had it at the time was DEA, FBI, and it was CBP, I believe, or it was ICE. We'll call them ICE at the time. They had different names. It was 3 agencies.
Yeah.
They were the only ones. And one out of the 3, only one had a literally direct contact. It was DEA. The other 2, they had a relationship, but not like DEA. We had that relationship now. That opened a huge door for us. Huge door.
So tell the story about essentially working because of your work. Somebody tries to basically put a hit out on you.
Oh, now that was a different one. Now we've already established. I mean, we're moving over there, but we're not only in Tijuana, we're in Cuernavaca, we're all over Mexico.
Right.
Because we're establishing relationships all over Mexico. And that's one thing about working Mexico liaison. Let's say, for example, I'll use Puebla. They're looking for a homicide suspect, and somehow or another, somebody gives a chief of police from Puebla. They'll say, "Call David Contreras. You're looking for him in LA. He can help you." They would contact me. I put them in contact with LAPD, and then we work with LAPD to find the homicide suspect for them. So now,
David, does San Diego still have this unit?
Yes, they still have this unit.
Okay.
Yes, they still. I don't know. Things have probably changed since I left there.
Yeah.
It's probably better. We'll just say that. It's probably better. I'm hoping it's better.
Okay.
But I mean, I would get a call from Puebla. I would get a call from Cabo San Lucas. I would get a call nationwide. All of a sudden, my phone, I mean, that's why I was telling you, my phone was blowing up all the time. And I would put, I'm looking for this guy in Milwaukee. We'll just say homicide, rape or whatever. And I would contact Milwaukee PD. "Hey, I'm sending you a flyer and this guy is wanted in Mexico. Interpol wants him." And before they didn't have, I was a liaison. You know, I'd hand it to my guys and we'd work together as a team. It wasn't me, it was all of us as a team. So we were rocking and rolling. So LAPD, this is back, I believe, in 1990. I'll send you the pictures. I'm not going to quote everything correctly. It's all by memory. Let's say it's 2011, 2012. Let's say in 2011. I'm just saying this. And please, those of you that are watching the show, I don't have my notes here. Sometime between 2009 and 2013, a deputy, I don't have his name here, but is working LA County Jail. And I'll send you the picture, so when we're talking, you go ahead and post them up.
Okay.
He's working LA County Jail. It's 5 o'clock in the morning. He's getting ready to load his truck up with his gear bag. He's living at his parents' house. In 2 weeks, it's in Cypress Park, which is the Avenue's gang area. His parents live there. He was Filipino, I believe. And in 2 weeks, he's moving. He already has his condo. His family's moving. He has a couple of kids, I believe. He's loading up his gear bag. I'll tell you the essence of it. As he's loading him up, avenues go by. They see him. They get out of the car. They shoot him in the back of the head. They execute him. They murder him. They get back in the car. They take off. He was a deputy sheriff going to jail. He was working at the county jail as a correctional officer. A year, 2 years go by. They capture the majority of the suspects, but there's one or two, but there's one in Mexico that is LAPD's looking for him. LAPD at the time, their homicide team was working with the U.S. Marshals. U.S. Marshals at the time were working with the Federales. They have a special federal team in Mexico that goes and grabs these guys. During this time, LAPD's working. They have an informant that is based out of, I'm not going to mention, so if they're watching it in prison, based somewhere, a relative of his. And the relative says, "I know where he's at. I saw his picture on Facebook. I know exactly where he's at." LAPD gets information. They send it to the U.S. Marshals in Mexico. And LAPD can verify this. I'm not putting the U.S. Marshals down. Those guys are gunslingers, are great guys. But there's certain occasions where their hands are tied. They send them the information where, and it was during the time where in Michoacan, they had La Familia Michoacana. They had Los Templarios. Different cartels were warring against each other. They call it Tierra Caliente, which means hot territory. The area where he was at was in Michoacan, the state of Michoacan, but in a ranch. And when I say a ranch, it's not a ranch, it's a community. And in that ranch, the federales were not going to go in. And if the federales were not going to go in, the U.S. Marshals were not going to go in. And they, for about a year, they knew exactly where he was at, but nobody would go and grab him. So LAPD heard about my team. They heard about my team. They asked to come and meet with me. Me and my team, they come in, they go, I don't know if you could help us. Because the first thing I said, you know what, if the U.S. Marshals, that's their job. I go, if they're here locally, I'll grab them with the U.S. Marshals, or my team will grab them if they're locally. But we're talking about Michoacan. And when they told me the story that they wouldn't touch them, I go, we'll touch them. I go, I have a way to touching them. And they go, well, they won't. I go, but I can. I go, we can. So the only way that I could do it was I talked to my general, the one that we had established a relationship with Tijuana. He goes, the best way to do it, he goes, I'm not going to take my team from Mexico because that's another state from Tijuana. He goes, but I'm going to put you in contact with the general in Michoacan and he will help you. I go, okay. He makes the call. When he makes the call, I had to go to Michoacan. But before I went to Michoacan, I talked to Liaison, who was now the chief of police in Juarez, which was the worst. Juarez that year, they had 2,800 murders. He was there. I call him. I go, hey, listen, I'm going to go to Michoacan. Can you, once again, he already's going to accept me, but can you corroborate who I am and what I need? Because, they're just like us. Yeah. They're not just going to get one call. Who is this guy, Contreras, coming? A municipal cop. He's not a federal agent. When they say FBI, DEA, oh, yeah, sure. But a municipal cop wants to come get a homicide suspect for LAPD? So I needed that second call. So Lisaola goes, I will, because we're good friends. He goes, if you come and you meet with me, have dinner with me. I go, yes, yeah, I'll go have dinner with you. So I go, once I'm there, it was only supposed to be a 2-day trip. My wife knew, 2-day trip. Dude, it turned out to be a week trip. Because once I'm there, he takes me all over the place. And he is really, showing me Juarez and telling me things, how we can help him. Intel, we were Intel. And he knew we were Intel. Give us a lot of really good information. So when I'm there, I'm meeting with him. It just happened. I go in, I meet with in Michoacan. I meet with them. We got it all set up. They're going to go take the guy out, but they need to take Oscar, one of my detectives. He was a case agent with him to go snatch this guy. So I have all that set up. I come back to Juarez, and while I'm in Juarez, Lisaola wants to take a picture with me. And I take another guy, a guy named Wayne Spees, and Wayne Spees, they wanted him to talk to the chiefs, all the chiefs. The cameras were there. They take a picture of me and they say, David Contreras, San Diego Police Department. And it just happened. It just happened that during the week that I was there, they arrested a guy by the name of Diego. I believe he was the leader of La Linea cartel, which had the direct tie to Mayo Zambada. Had a direct tie. He was the liaison. Well, he was his man in Juarez. They had a big war going on. And he was there. They arrested him. So when Mayo Zambada found that out, he, for whatever reason, said it was David Contreras that arrested him. So we're there. Lisaola, give him a hug. I'm there for a week. We fly back to San Diego. Now it's Friday night. I get there about 5 o'clock. Saturday, my wife's pissed off. She doesn't believe that I'm working. She doesn't believe that I'm not drinking. And dude, I never drank in my life in Mexico. Well, after Liaison, before I did. And now, so I tell her, you know what? It's Sunday night. Let me take you to a really nice restaurant. I take her to a really nice restaurant. It's called Salvatore's. It's downtown San Diego. It's expensive, beautiful Italian restaurant. We had never been there before, but it's one of those, you know what? I gotta make up to you. We're having dinner, and she hated whenever we'd be together. My phone would be blowing up. That time I remember, I just go, hope I don't get no calls out of disrespect to her, right? My phone starts blowing up, and it's FBI. Finally, I go, I got to get this, Wavy. Her name is Wavy. I go, I got to get this. So I answered, and he goes, where are you? And I go, what do you mean, where am I? I knew who it was. And he goes, David, he goes, Mayo Zambada put a contract out for your life. And I go, what are you talking about? And he goes, let me answer me this question. Were you in Juarez last week? I go, yes. Did you come in on flight number so-and-so? And did you arrive in San Diego at 5 o'clock on Friday? I go, I don't remember the exact flight. I go, but yes, I arrived in San Diego. Do you live? And he gave my address in Chula Vista. He goes, do you live in this address? Yes. He goes, how do you think I know all this? I go, because you're FBI. And he goes, and I started laughing. He goes, David, this isn't no joking matter. He goes, Mayo Zambada has put a contract out for you, and there's a group of hitmen that know exactly what flight you came in, and they're on your way to your house to kill you and your family. And I go, come on, dude, you're fucking kidding me. I wanted to laugh. You know what I mean? Really? And I go, his name was Vic. I go, really, Vic? And he goes, I'm telling you, David. He goes, hang up. And I go, dude, you're messing. I hang up. Within a second, my lieutenant, Andy Mills, calls me. And he goes, where are you? I go, dude, I just got a call. And he goes, it's real, David. He goes, we're going to send our GST, which are gang suppression team, 20 cars over to pick you up. I go, no. I go, listen, let me get in my car. Let me drive to headquarters. He goes, David, you're taking a risk. I got a gun on me, Andy. Don't worry about it. I go, and I'll drive to headquarters, which is a couple of blocks away. I get to headquarters, the helicopter's up, a bunch of units are there, and they're taking me. They're taking me to a hideaway. And me and my wife, and I go, guys, this is all the clothes I got. I got to go to my house in Chula Vista. He goes, well, before we go, we got to set a perimeter around your house. And they did. The helicopter, everything was up. I get to my house. We get our clothes real quick, jump in the car. They take me to the Hyatt up on the second, to the highest story of the Hyatt. They reserved 4 rooms, put me in the middle, and I was there for 5 days until they got it cleared up.
How'd they get it cleared up?
You know what? It was actually DEA that got it cleared up. I believe it was Juan Martinez that got it cleared up.
Wow.
And basically, once it was cleared, then business back to normal again.
What do you think they did?
Yeah.
Do you think they somehow contacted somebody within the cartel and went, hey, man, this guy doesn't have anything to do with what you think he did?
You know what? I'm not going to speculate, but I think somebody got a phone call, says if anything happens to, they couldn't say hair because I'm bald, if a hair goes missing, but they probably said if anything happens to this guy is not DEA. When do you hear DEA? You don't hear them going after DEA. He goes, if anything happens to him, you and your family or something's going to happen to you. Because you know what? Once it was taken off, I lasted. My lieutenant wouldn't let me go to Mexico for a week. After a week, I was back to normal again. I was back to rocking and rolling again.
When you were in the CIU unit, how many homicides, rapes, violent things did you work on specifically in Mexico and maybe even solve because of that?
Well, you know what? Out of the 4.5 years, close to 5 years, we were tallying. I remember at one time in the office, we brought 17 homicide suspects, and I could venture to say dozens of rapists, of child molesters, of kidnappers that were in Mexico at the time. We didn't even count those, to be honest with you, but that was like on a weekly basis. We'd catch somebody over there, or they'd catch somebody. The majority of the time they would catch them, they would notify us, and we would work with them. But on the homicide suspects, the majority of the time we had the information, we gave it to special teams, usually la Policía Estatal Preventiva, which is PEP. In Tijuana, we would work with them a lot. We would work with the military. We would work with different agencies. It all depended who we knew that was not going to, if they were cartel related, which cartel which department. For example, the municipal police work for the Arellanos. The state police work for the, not all of them, but I'm just saying they had a strong liaison with Sinaloa. The military, a lot with Sinaloa. So if I was going after somebody that was Sinaloa, I would go with the municipal police. If I was going after somebody that was from Sinaloa, or Arellano, I would go with the state police or the federal police. It all depended. But the majority of the time, only one time that I put cuffs on somebody, but all the other times they put the handcuffs on them. And they were the ones that brought him back. Let me give you an example how good we were at the time. There was a homicide that occurred on I-5 going southbound and La Jolla Boulevard. You know where that's at, La Jolla Boulevard, going toward USD or UCSD, going toward that direction. This guy gets into an argument with his wife. He beats her up. He chokes her. After he chokes her, he pulls off on the side of the road, lights the car on fire. Car blows up. I don't know how he got to Tijuana. This happens, let's say, at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. He goes to Tijuana. Once he gets to Tijuana, I get the phone call. First of all, they don't call me he's in Tijuana. It's just we think he's going to Tijuana. Family members, I guess homicide, got word. I had him, or Alejandro Lares, who later became the chief of police. He was a liaison. We sent him all the information. This is where he might be and so forth. Within less than 24 hours, we had him in custody in Tijuana. We had him he had just murdered his wife in the United States. That's how good we were. They had him in custody in Tijuana. Alex calls me. He goes, David, do you want him? I go, yes. He goes, talk to him. So I go down there. We talk to him. We interview him. And I tell him, I go, listen, do you want to go across the border? He goes, yes, I want to go across the border, but you're a Mexican citizen. We got to extradite you. He goes, I'm willingly going to cross the border. I go, okay, Alex. I thanked him. Alex Lares later became the chief of police. Oh, that guy's fucking outstanding. That's another guy you need to interview. Mexico, Alex Lares. That guy's outstanding. Speaks perfect English. So I tell Alex, stand by, Alex. Let me go across the border. Let me call the district attorney and tell him that you got their homicide. Not me. You got their homicide suspect, and we're going to cross them. I call the district attorney. They send me to their district attorney liaison. They contact, I believe it was Bonnie Dumanes. I don't remember who the DA is, probably her. And she says, there's no way that this guy's going to come across. We need to extradite him. And they tell him, well, you know what, Contreras, who the heck is Contreras? You know what I mean? No. And they go, but if he's willing to come, and these are all attorneys, let's take him. They go, well, we're not taking his word. I know they said that. We need somebody, the San Diego Police homicide detective, sergeant, and we need the detective homicide, and we need the DA investigator to be at the border with a camera. Because they didn't believe me that we could do that, right? I go, okay, so they get there, and it was Dave Johnson, I believe. He was a homicide sergeant at the time. He brings his detective. They have a camera up. We clear the pathway for the border. I call Lares, hey, bring him across. He's bringing him across. He's handcuffed, and as he's bringing him across, I'm looking to make sure there's no cuts on him. He wasn't beat up or anything. He gets there, and right before he comes across the border, we're at the yellow line. I mean, this is how good we were. I mean, within 24 hours, and that's how good we were. He gets there. The camera, I go, you guys have the camera on? Yes. I go, I'm going to ask him. Tell me what you want me to ask him. Were you beat up? Did anybody force you to come across that border? And they couldn't ask him because they didn't interrogate him yet until we got him. Just did anybody beat you up? Are you willingly coming across? And I'm translating. And he goes, yes, I'm willingly coming across. I go, okay. And I wasn't going to ask him, why are you coming? Because they would have talked about the murder, right? He hasn't been at Miranda. He's in custody in Mexico, but not here. Mm-hmm. So we're very careful. I go, okay, so you want to come to the United States illegally? He goes, yes. And you know you're going to be, I'm breaking it down. They had the video on. I go, okay, Lares, take off the cuffs. I go, are you hurt anyway? He goes, no. And meanwhile, Lares is pinching him. No, I'm not kidding. I'm kidding. No, he was not being pinched. That's just a joke. It's a cop joke. Lares takes off the cuffs, puts the cuffs. I take out my cuffs, put my cuffs on him, put them up front, and I go, you're willingly, once again, yes, walked him across the border within 24 hours. Mm. That's how good we were. Mm. That's another time. I'll tell you another story. Another time, a guy had murdered a neighbor, had stabbed him to death. And this one took me probably about 6 months to catch. We put a tracker on the wife's car. She goes across the border. It took me 6 months to finally get her to go across the border right before Christmas. She drives over to Ensenada. We're tracking her, and we're working. I mean, this is Christmas Eve, Christmas time. We're working undercover. We rented a van. I'm in a van with the Mexican police. We're parked a block away. I haven't been home for 3 days. We are literally taking pisses. I mean, you know what it's like, DEA, on water cans, right? It smells like shit in that van. But you know what? I don't want to leave because she's there. We know that he's there at that house in Ensenada. Los Salitos it's called. He's there. Finally, after like the second day and a half, I'm like, the heck with this, man. I got to get home, man. I mean, we're eating tacos every day and taking shits outside. I mean, down the street at a gas station. And you know those Mexican gas stations, they smell. Those bathrooms, right? I haven't taken a shower. So finally, like on the second day and a half, all of a sudden, man, we're watching. She hasn't come out. Or she comes out, she goes to the store, but I don't have enough to hit the house with the Mexican. I got Mexican teams all over the place. And they're pissed off now, the Mexican cops, because it's going to be Christmas and they want to be with their families. And I'm telling them, guys, we're staying. He's in there. I know he is. They just want to go kick the door. But we're bringing him across. He's a U.S. citizen. I got everything. And all of a sudden, as we're there, we see a man come out dressed like Osama bin Laden. He comes out with a turban and he has a beard and he has a long robe, and these are Mexicans. So I got the binoculars on him and I go, guys, these guys have ties to terrorists. They're Muslim. I didn't say Muslim. I go, they're terrorists. I go, what's this guy doing there? They're terrorists. And we knew this guy was not a terrorist. He was a construction worker who stabbed his neighbor, stabbed him to death over a party. The guy was dancing with his wife. He just got out of prison. He stabbed him to death and ran to Mexico. So we see him and they want to take him down now, especially these cops. Hey, Osama bin Laden. That's before they got Osama, right? So I'm all, you know what, guys? Stand by. Let's follow. They all get in the car. The kids come out, the family. They get in the car and then they start driving. They drive right past us. By now, we're driving and I got Oscar in the car with me. And, we got a bunch of Mexican cops in this van. We're following them. They go to a church. And when they go to the church, he gets off. And it's a Christian church, like Assembly of God or something. He gets off, the whole family gets off, they go inside, and I'm thinking, this isn't a mosque. And this guy's dressed like that, and as we see that, we see little shepherds going in. It was a Christmas play. A Christmas play. So what I do, I tell Oscar, I go, Oscar, because we were all in plain clothes, right? I mean, we smelled, bro. So I go, Oscar, jump out and walk inside the church, take another Mexican cop with you and just go in there and praise the Lord and confirm it's him. So Oscar's in there and he's texting me. He goes, Sarge, I still can't tell, man. He goes, he has a beard on. And somehow or another, I think he was Melchizedek. You know, they have Melchizedek, different ones. Mm-hmm. When he named something, Oscar saw that his wife went and whispered something in his ear. He was in the car. Oscar goes, it's him. I go, are you sure? He goes, I am sure. I go, okay, so we're going to wait for him to come out of the church and then we're going to tackle him. And dude, he comes out of the church. I had all these cops all dressed in plain clothes. He comes out of the play and everybody's coming out. Hallelujah. You know, when they're coming out, dude, they tackle him. They handcuff him, take the turban off with a wig. It was him. Thank God. We throw him in the back of the van and boom, we go straight to Mexican immigration. We brought him across the border dressed like that without the turban and the beard. You know, I mean, cases like that.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
How, when you were dealing in that unit,
Mm-hmm.
were you ever concerned with corruption within any of the...
Of course.
Yeah?
Of course. Everybody's corrupt.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Except Lattis. Lattis and Charlie at the time, dude, those guys, I would bet my life. But everybody else that I will, the lieutenant colonel at the time,
Mm-hmm.
like I said, it was a relationship. But that I trusted, like if I was hanging from a cliff, hold my rope, Charlie and Lattis, hold it. I knew for a fact that they were going to hold it. But other than that, everybody else, arm's length.
How did you,
You know?
how did you deal with that, knowing keeping you and your guys safe then, if there was always that element of possible corruption?
Well, bro, like I've always said, I don't trust anybody. I don't believe anybody. And you know what? Even Lattis, I mean, I love that guy. He's like a brother. He really is. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've slept in many hotels with him. And you know what? And he was standing at the door with an AR-15 while I slept, or vice versa. I'm holding his AR-15 in critical areas. Mm-hmm. I trust him with my life. But you know what? Other than those two, everybody else, it was on a need-to-know basis, limited information that I gave them, and I'm sure it was the same coming toward me. It was never that brotherly trust.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was respect.
Yeah.
I respected. I think that's how I was able to survive. And I would tell my men that worked for me, no women worked at the time. Now I believe they do. But at the time, I mentioned my men that worked for me in Mexico, that, you know what, don't trust anybody, don't believe anybody. And you know what, at the same time, you know what, remember, this is business, nothing personal. And the minute that you see that we're being compromised, say something, because over here we could disappear. And another thing that I did when I took over that unit, I had our DNA. I took our DNA and I actually put it in a paper bag. We all had our separate bags because we knew that one day, I mean, nobody does that.
Yeah.
Dude, we had our DNA in our separate bags. It was basically, if I don't come back, my DNA is there. You'll be able to identify. And one guy actually said, I don't want to be in this unit anymore because you're asking for DNA. Yes, I am. Because you know what? If something happens over there and I can't find you, I'm going to hopefully be able to identify it through DNA. And one guy actually said, I'm out of here.
Wow.
But I had to think like that
Yeah.
because we're not federal cops.
Yeah.
I mean, we go missing. I'll guarantee you the President Bush wasn't going to say, oh, Contreras is missing. I mean, let it be a DEA federal agent, of course.
Yeah.
We were just municipal cops.
Yeah.
We ran over there. Literally, it was like the old wild days, you know?
How far in your career did you get married for the second time?
You know what? I got divorced in 1990. 1990,
Yeah.
1993, I met the love of my life.
Okay, so 93.
3 years. No. 3 years later, I met her. We dated for 2 years. In 95, I got married.
But what unit, even when you meet her, what unit are you in at that
Community
point?
relations.
Okay, so
Yeah.
this is way back when, okay?
Yeah.
So,
It was through community relations that I met her.
okay, so how did, I'm assuming,
She was a parole administrator, so
But
we
no-
were on a task force
yeah,
together.
but you're a gunslinger. You're
Yeah.
working the whole time.
Yeah.
You're in the CIU unit. I know you're putting in hours and hours
yes,
and hours.
never
right?
home.
How did being in law enforcement affect your family?
You know what? It affected my children. It didn't affect my wife because her father was in the military. He was a chief. So she was like yourself, moving all the time.
Okay.
It didn't affect her, and she knew by then who I was. I was a changed man. I wasn't cheating anymore. I was tired. You know what I mean? So I was. I mean, if you believe it or not, I was tired. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I remember when we went on our first date that dude, we're out and we're at the Hyatt. We're at very top. There's a bar up there. And she looks at me and she goes, so what is it that you want? Dude, on our first date. And I go, you know what? I want to fall in love. And she goes, what? I go, I want to fall in love. And she goes, what do you mean you want to fall in love? I go, I am tired. She goes, well, I can make you fall in love. I go, really? Please do. I go, I'm tired. I'm tired of playing games. I wasn't raised like this. My dad wasn't a womanizer. He wasn't a cheater. My dad was a good man. I took a different path. You know, I'm tired. And you know what? And I think, and she thought that I was bullshitting her, that I used that line. Dude, I never used that line. I just happened to say it to her. And you know what? I fell in love. And because of that, she helped me change. So it didn't affect our marriage because she knew that I was very goal oriented. And she knew that when I had my eye on something, that no matter, I wasn't going to stop. That's why my nickname in the department was Yard Dog. Because you know what? When I got a hold of a case, I didn't let it go. I wouldn't sleep at night thinking about the homicide suspects that I was chasing in Mexico. If I was going to serve a search warrant the next day in narcotics or in gangs, I wouldn't sleep that night thinking that I don't want to be that sergeant that goes and tells the family that he died on my watch. I wouldn't sleep.
Yeah.
I would literally, and I'm sure there are a lot of supervisors that, God bless you if you could sleep. I couldn't. I've always been very goal oriented. So it affected my kids. It affected my family. Like I said,
How did it affect your kids?
Well, my kids, because I'd be at their soccer game and all of a sudden I'd get paged out. Hey, we got a sighting here. We got to go here. And then I'd call Wavy, you come pick them up. You know, I got to go. And I'd leave. You know what I mean? There was a lot of Christmases, a lot of birthday parties that I missed. A lot of birthday parties. I missed. My priority in life was wrong. My priority in life was work. You know what I mean? I was that workaholic.
Do you think if I talked to your kids, they would say there was any negative effect of you or
You know what? They love me today,
Right.
but I'm sure if they would open up to you, I mean, just the other day, I'm in San Diego with my grandchildren, and my daughter wants to take them to go see a movie, and because she had promised them, and I told her, Monique, I want to take them out to dinner to Sizzler. Why don't you go see the movie tomorrow, Dad? Because I promised. I go, they're kids. He goes, Dad, don't you remember how many times you changed? I mean, so that came out. That's a perfect example of you were inconsistent, Dad. You know, I don't want to be you.
yeah.
You know, but she didn't say it rudely because my daughter loves me, Monique, but she said it because it's in her. They saw that in me, that I was very inconsistent because, not because I wanted to be, I would always change plans because that phone rang and that was a priority.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Audience, so that you know, David runs a podcast with a few other people called The Gray Line, The Story Behind the Blue Line. Can you tell me what's the podcast about and why'd you start it?
We started this podcast because you're going to notice a lot of people talk about the blue line, the brotherhood. Dude, that's not real. I mean, and I'm sure I'm going to be the only one, and you're probably going to get a lot of criticism over this, and a lot of cops are going to say, what's that guy talking about? When you're on the job, guess what? Sarge this, Sarge that. And oh my God, you know, after you leave, literally, I have a video of when I left. I had my chair, I had my extra large computer screen that I had taken from somebody else that had retired. I did. Somebody else that had retired. And I had my desk in my office. When I left, somebody took my computer screen, somebody took my chair. My desk was completely empty. And you know what? You know, blessed are those that still have contact with other cops where they get together once a week. But the majority of the cops that I've talked to, that I've experienced, the guys that are on my podcast, once you're gone, brother.
Yeah.
And you know what? And I'm guilty of that. One of my favorite sergeants that I had, I mean, this guy was the best sergeant, was Manny Smith. When he retired, before he retired, brother, I'd give my life to you, got drunk with him many of times. And once he retired, I was working a Mexico Liaison. I remember I was in gangs at the time. He would call me, hey, Dave, let's get together for lunch. We'd be together for lunch. He'd be seeing me looking at my phone because I was on the job. I didn't have time. And when I was with him, I wasn't listening to him because my mind was somewhere else. So it's the job. You know what I mean? So the reason why is because when people retire, their legendary stories are never told again, are never mentioned again. And Benny and I were the ones that started. And then we brought Chalo, former chief of police. Benny's a retired detective with the San Diego Sheriffs, did 42 years on the department.
42 years?
42 years.
Wow.
Chalo is a retired chief of police from Calexico. There was a lot of corruption. That'd be another one for you to talk to. And Sean was a retired lieutenant with San Diego PD. He was a SWAT dog, did 20 years on SWAT. So it's all four of us that, the four of us that have this podcast. That's on Tuesday. And the reason why is we bring in guests like you would come on and we want to hear your legendary stories. We want those legendary stories to be on video, be on camera, so the younger cops could watch and their grandchildren could watch. Because those stories, once you die, they're never told again.
Yeah.
They're gone.
Yeah.
People will talk, and when they do talk, guess what? They become the heroes. After I retired, I went to a couple of get-togethers. I'm sitting there and I'm hearing guys talk, oh, I remember we did this, and I'm thinking, motherfucker, I did that. You know what I mean? But I don't say nothing.
Yeah.
I don't say nothing. I just look at them and I'm thinking, you weren't even there. You know what I mean? But what I'm saying is all these legendary stories that are told by cops, we let them come on our show and they tell the people that we've had on our show. Oh my God. We had former warden Danny Vasquez. This guy started back in 1964. We have former warden Art Calderon. Worked at did 11 executions at St. Quentin as a warden. Ayers. Dude, the people that we've had on our show are just guests that tell their stories.
Yeah.
Now that's Tuesday.
Yeah.
Tuesday. Did we mention Ash Wednesday?
Yeah. So, but before you do, so audience, I will highly recommend. It was part 2 of David's career. There is a story in there that he tells. Just listen to it. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. So yeah. So as if you're not busy enough,
Yeah.
you also have a podcast, Ash Wednesday and Los Tres Chingones,
Chingones, yes.
boxing podcast. So tell me
Yes.
about those two.
Well, so Tuesday, it's with the former chief of police, SWAT dog, detective, and myself. It's very formal. Benny does a great job putting together a video intro for every guest that we have. And then we'll always ask him, what's your favorite song? Whatever it is, he puts a collage of your pictures on there. And then we send you the questions in advance, so you have them. You're not comfortable, you tell us, I don't want to answer this question. That's fine. It's in a formal setting. We do use it on StreamYard. I'm here. Sean's in Virginia. Benny's in Southern California. And Chalo is in Calexico. And then our guests could be Colombia, wherever. But it's that. But on Wednesday, which is called Ash Wednesday, I have a guy named Bobby Arce, a former detective, narcotic detective out of Phoenix PD. The guy's a legend. And I have Doug Collier, which is another legend. You need to have him on your show. Both of those guys need to be on your show. And he's a legend when it comes to gang investigations, warrants, and so forth. Legends. And what we do is we smoke a cigar, we sit down, and we have a drink of bourbon or of whiskey or tequila with our guests. And we just talk. We've had Mike Vigil, a renowned DEA SAC. We've had a lot of people on our show, and we just say, so tell us, how was DEA? So tell us about your most memorable moments. And we, over a drink, just talk.
Yeah.
Just talk. Yeah. No sound effects. I just talk. And that's on Wednesdays. Every Wednesday at 5 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. And then on Fridays, I have a boxing show called Los Tres Chingones. And we're all boxing analysts. I've had world champions on my show. As a matter of fact, one that just died, Israel Vasquez, El Magnifico. The guy's a legend. He's been on my show. He's a very personal friend of mine. He just died of cancer 2 days ago. So I've had a lot of people on my show, and we basically break down past fights, present fights, and future fights. And we just talk boxing, dude. And when I on that show, I have a blast because I love boxing.
Man.
Yeah. And I'm also writing a book.
Okay, and I want to talk to you about that, but let's talk about your first book first, because I have several questions about this. So your first book is When the Music Stops, the Pain Begins. Tell me what that book is about.
When the music, you know where I got that saying from? I don't know if you ever watched Chicago PD.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, that Sergeant Voight, that dude is awesome, man. And that's where I got it. One day, I guess he was talking to somebody about PTSD, and he said those words, when the music stops, the pain begins. And you know what? And it was after I retired that I basically knew I had PTSD. It was after I retired that I saw the effects of being a cop for 32 years. And one of the things that hit me the hardest at first was the adrenaline rushes. I miss the adrenaline rushes. You know, people have different names for them, but to me, you know what? As a cop, every day when you're out in the field, you have 2 or 3 rushes a day, literally, when you're a street cop. When you're a DE agent, you might have them 1 or 2 a week. You know what I mean? When you're serving that high-risk search warrant, when you're making that stop, when you're making that buy, you know what I mean? But as a cop, you hit lineup. As soon as lineup is over, that foot pursuit, that car pursuit, that suicide, that shots fired. I mean, your adrenaline's going up and down, up and down. So when you retire, all of a sudden, you literally go from 5,000 in a 25-year career. A normal person has 5 to 11 in a lifetime. A cop, 3 to 4,000 during his 30-year career, all of a sudden to nothing. To nothing, literally. And that's what this book was written. That's why, and another thing too, another reason why is because we as cops, we think that only people that are trigger pullers, they call them combat veterans, have PTSD, but no, we as cops, any person that suffers or witnesses a traumatic event, you know, can have PTSD. But you imagine as a cop, how many suicides we've seen, how many killings we've seen, how many rapes we've seen, how many homicides, and that could go on and on and on.
Yeah.
And you know what? What we learn to do is we learn to compartmentalize all of these incidents that we have seen throughout 30 years of our career, we have to compartmentalize, because if we don't, what happens? After your first suicide, oh my God, you break down, you're going to quit being a cop. You can't continue, but you compartmentalize. And that's what this book is about. Basically written by Detective Sergeant Pete Bollinger, 26 years or 30 years with the Santa Ana Police Department, Benny Cruz, 42 years, and me, San Diego PD. We put our stories together, and it's basically stories of how we feel today and how we suffer from PTSD. And it's written by 3 cops, and it's helped a lot of people. I've gotten a lot of emails from people saying, thank you for the book. You know what? It saved my life. It saved my marriage, because it's written by people that were there.
How did you deal with that, David? When you retired, you go from the high to the low. How did you personally deal with that?
That's the reason why I started my PI company in Mexico. That's the reason why I started my PI company in Mexico, because I knew that, you know what, I wasn't going to get the adrenaline rush anymore.
Yeah.
Every time I'd cross that border, my adrenaline came back up again. I wasn't involved in high pursuits anymore as a civilian.
Yeah.
I wasn't involved in responding to a suicide. No, now every time I'd cross that border, that's why I did what I did. That's number one. Now, when it came time to compartmentalizing, and when the dreams started happening, that happened after I retired. The dreams, and then all of a sudden I've had one certain dream, and then all of a sudden triggers. All of a sudden I be somewhere and I see somebody standing by a bridge. That's in the book, and all of a sudden I couldn't breathe. I would tell myself, why? Well, because I saw that guy jump over the bridge, and I was holding his hand, and I saw him land. And I saw him as he's falling down say, "Fuck you." But I had I never thought about that. But it was after I retired that certain things, I can't go to a football game. I can't go even to a church. I can't go. When I have people around me, I start breaking out into sweats. I feel like I'm being in line. No patience, being in line at a bank, and all of a sudden I feel claustrophobic. You know what I mean? Anything, I'm going crazy. These are all side effects of PTSD, and I didn't know at the time. But what has helped me, believe it or not, is the Lord. I went back to the Lord. I went back and I knelt on my knees 3 years ago, and I cried out to God, and now I know what my triggers are. Like tomorrow, Sunday, they're having a big, where I live right now, here in Tampa, they're having a huge Christmas party. Last year I went, my wife saw me there 5 minutes and I disappeared. And I go, call me when you're ready. And she's like, what's the matter with you? I can't be around people. I feel claustrophobic. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm not going to this because I know what triggers me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I refuse to take medication for it, but if you need to take medication, take it. Please do. I refuse. I know what my triggers are. If I go to a Tampa game, I know that I'm sitting there and I'm going to feel, I know what my triggers are. And now, how can I associate that with an incident? I can't. But I know what they are, so I avoid them. I avoid them.
How about counseling? You ever thought about that?
I do the counseling. Oh yeah.
Okay.
When I first started my program or my company, Sheepdog Assist, I got overwhelmed because I'm a one-man show. I don't charge for my services. I teach nationwide, and I don't charge for my services. Anything associated with PTSD on this book, I give the majority of them away. To be honest with you, you could buy it. I think it's like $35 on Amazon. If you can't afford it, I'll give it to you. You know what I mean? I've spent hundreds of dollars buying them, giving them away, because I'm not in it for the money.
Yeah.
I'm in it for the passion. I want to help people. You know what I mean? So what happened, getting back to this real quick, I know we've been on for a while.
No, we're going. We're
I'll
good.
tell you, one of the things that with me is I got overwhelmed because the majority of the people that have watched my shows, they're from Southern California. I live in Tampa. It's a 3-hour difference. At 11 o'clock when they can't sleep, it's 2 o'clock my time. And I would literally stay up for days counseling pastors, counseling police officers, a lot of correctional officers, counseling correctional officers. And I wasn't sleeping. And my wife saying, I would have to get up, come here to my office. I mean, as you could see, I walk up here and I'm counseling at 2, 3 in the morning. Dude, I got overrun. That's one. And the second thing that really just kicked my ass was that a lot of the counseling was associated with child abuse, with child abuse. You take it from there.
Wow.
And you know what, pastors, and I'm not an expert. Dude, I listen.
Yeah.
And I recommend what to do. And one of our recommendations, I'll tell you right now, my recommendations were always seek God, seek professional help, whether it's medication, but seek professional help, seek counseling, and exercise. Those were 4.
Yeah.
I mean, that's exercise, work out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And 6 months later, I'm still getting those same calls. And I'm not charging. That's why psychologists are so make a lot of money.
Oh, yeah.
Because you know what? They charge.
Yeah.
And people didn't follow through. So I just said, you know what? I'm sorry. I can't help you. We wrote the book, buy the book, and that's going to help you. Or else, if you really need my help, I can help you. But make sure that you follow through.
Okay. As if you're not busy enough, you have a second book.
I'm writing it right now, yes.
Tell me what it's about.
Oh, this book, I'm excited. Before I die, I got to finish this book. I'm telling you. This book, it's on active shooters in schools. God has placed a burden in my heart, just like he did with the other book, for police suicides and so forth. But this book, it's geared toward teachers and students who have been the victims of active shooters, school shootings. Nobody talks about, everybody always says these words, and I think that might be the title. Our thoughts and prayers are with you. Okay, well, that's good. Thoughts and prayers are with you. But what happens 10 years from now when that little boy has those triggers? Because he was in that classroom when he's now living with survivor's remorse. Where he's thinking, why didn't I die? But yet little Michael did. You know what I mean? What happens to that teacher when she can't sleep? She's drinking herself to sleep. And she's going through a divorce and her kids because she's become an alcoholic. Nobody's addressing these issues. So my book is going to be, and what I'm going to do, my first chapter, it's going to start off with a bang. It's going to be on the Uvalde shooting. I've already started doing a case study. I'm looking at probably flying over there next month for about a week, interviewing teachers, students. Well, I don't know about the students, but teachers, police officers that responded. From there, I'm going to break it down. It's going to be about 20 chapters. The other case study that I'm going to have is a Parkland shooting here in Fort Lauderdale. And I have three shooters that I'm going to interview. One of them is Nick Cruz. He was a Parkland shooter. Another guy that was involved in the Santana shooting 2003 in Santana, San Diego. And another one is a little girl, Brenda Spencer, I believe is her name. She was one of the first shooters in San Diego that killed, I believe, the principal, vice principal, and the custodian, and shot, I believe, 12 students. So I'm going to not only give the solutions, but why. And then I'm also going to do a case study on all these video games. How are they related? Are they desensitizing our kids to murder, to shoot people? So it's going to be a really good book. It's going to be, like I said, 20 to 23 chapters.
Yeah.
I've already started on that, and I'm excited about it because you know what? My overall goal is to save people because we're sheepdogs.
Yeah.
That's what we're here for, to save people.
Last question for you, David. Can you look back on your career from when you started with corrections to now? Have your views on people and society changed?
That's a good question. No. You know what? Patterns of behavior never change. Patterns of behavior never change. And you know what? Whether it was when I was 17 years old, 15 years old, or today, patterns of behavior, I always look at patterns of behavior, how people act. And I'm able to predict what's going to happen to a lot of people based on their patterns of behavior. So my perspective on people, I went through a stage where I was very cynical, very critical, very judgmental, and I'm working on that.
Okay.
I'm working on that. That is not, like I said, I can't go to a church. And the reason why I believe in Jesus, I read my word, and I talk a lot about God. But the minute I go into a church, even my sister, they're pastors. They have a beautiful church. I'm sitting there and I'm looking around. That's a child molester. That's a drug. Dude, and I come out of there feeling I didn't get the message because I still need help with that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
yeah,
I'm still working on that. I'm still working on that.
But do you think if you would never have gone to corrections or ever been a police officer that you'd have the feelings that you do now?
No, because I would have been a pastor, and I think that I never would have been exposed to what I've been exposed to, and I think I would have believed everything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I believe everything, and I think that the job, I allowed it. Because the job doesn't change you. you allow it to change you.
Yeah.
I allowed it to change you, and it has made me the man that I am today. And I think I was able to survive the world that I worked in the abyss, because number one, I was critical, I was judgmental, and I didn't believe a thing. And that's what helped me survive.
David, thank you very much for the interview.
Thank you.